The first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 4062. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 4062, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to state government appropriating money for environment, natural resources, and tourism, the unofficial engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Senate File 4062 is the Omnibus Environment, Finance, and Policy Bill. I want to make sure before we start that we thank some very important people. Janelle Taylor and Bob Eliff from House Research, Fiscal Analyst Brad Hagemeyer, Committee Administrator Peter Strohmeyer, Committee Legislative Assistant Scotland Cracker, and partisan researchers Molly Peterson and Amy Zipko. Thank you for your work. Very important. We could not do this job without our staff. This is the Environment and Natural Resources Omnibus Bill. This bill has a net general fund target of $240 million for the FY 22-23 biennium. It appropriates $9.6 million from additional funds. For FY 24 biennium, the bill adds $35 million from the general fund and $31.9 million from other funds. Members, why do we have this bill here? What does it do? Well, it fixes past wrongs, rights past wrongs, some going back to 2003 and 2005. It repays the Metropolitan Landfill Contingency Action Act Trust with interest. This fund was raided during the Pawlenty administration and doesn't have enough money to maintain and clean up closed landfill sites. This is a Representative Richardson bill, and $29.055 million of one-time money are used to restore that fund, those fees that were paid by folks in the metro area for closed landfills. It rededicates the lottery and lieu tax to its intended purpose of funding our natural resources. For FY, this also was raided in the Pawlenty administration to balance the budget. So when this was established in the late 1990s, 97% of the lottery and lieu fund, the tax, went into environmental programming. In 03 and 05, it had a net effect of a cut down to about 72%. So we're restoring that funding in the tails, in ongoing funding, from the general fund back to those intended purposes. We're not changing where the money goes. We're just putting money back into that fund the way it was intended to the 97%. We make significant investments in conservation. $30 million for the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. This program brings in money from the federal government. Often in the past we've thought about the acre amount, but actually it is a dollar contract, and we can enhance Conservation Reserve Program. What that'll do is help out with wildlife, water quality, pollinators, and more importantly, climate change. Those long-term easements provide for carbon storage in the ground. And we have the soil and water districts who can put those projects in the ground and make them last. We also provide $10 million for a CRP state incentive. We have a number of provisions relating to CWD and other contaminants. So I am going to go to Representative Eklund to talk about our CWD investments.
The representative from Couchiching, Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So here we are talking about chronic wasting disease again. But you know, we found a live, or I mean, not it's dead, but it was in the wild herd in Itasca County. That's concerning. So this chronic wasting disease bill has several sections in it, several parts to it. Number one, we're prohibiting running at large. It allows a person during a legal authorized season to shoot a captive whitetail cervid that has escaped and not face any consequences, and the owner will have to pay for the test of that animal if in fact they do shoot one during the season. Provides fencing, redundant fencing. You know, last year, members, I got chastised on the House floor because it's blame the farmer. No, we're not blaming the farmer. We just want to work with the farmers to make sure that this is done right. I have no desire to shut down the service industry. It can provide valuable input to our economy around the state, but let's do it right. Let's make sure that we get things done right. Mandatory surveillance of chronic wasting disease and depopulation of the herd if it's found. That only makes sense. Folks, we don't know how long prions last in the environment. When we have a positive herd found in the state of Minnesota, it needs to be depopulated and taken care of. Importation of captive cervid from other states. It just prohibits the importation if it's come from if there's been a positive test from that farm in whatever other state they're trying to import the animal from. I think the biggest thing that we have in this bill, members, is we've got new technology. It has not been approved by the FDA, but it's getting close. But we have technology that we can live test our captive cervids now to find out if they're positive, and if it is, what mitigation factors we have. So we have appropriation in the bill for live testing to find out if in fact we do have a problem with captive cervids and chronic wasting disease in the state of Minnesota. And this will accomplish two things. If we do have a problem, let's take care of it. And if we don't have a problem, we can find out that our captive cervid industry is doing things the right way. And that's all that I'm looking for, is to make sure things are done the right way. And then probably the biggest thing is we're transferring the full authority to the Department of Natural Resources. And I think if we take a look at what's going on now with the Board of Animal Health and the DNR having co-authority, they're working towards the right direction. But the Board of Animal Health is also dealing with another little issue right now, the high-path avian influenza. Let's let them do their job, make sure that we take care of our poultry industry in the state of Minnesota, and let's let the DNR do their job. So members, this is whitetail hunting in the state of Minnesota is a $500 million a year industry. It's huge. And I don't know how many deer hunters are on the House floor today, but I hunt. My wife wonders really why I buy a license. I think it's been 7 years since I shot a deer, but I buy a license every year to help the DNR out with their fees anyway. So this is good language, and I want to rest people assured that I'm not blaming the farmer. But when we get down to taking care of protecting our wild herd, we must take all means possible to make sure that happens. So thank you, members, and I believe it goes to Representative Wozliak to talk about PFAS issues.
To the representative from Ramsey, Representative Wozliak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So PFAS are used in many consumer products, often because of their grease or water-resistant properties. They are persistent in the environment, highly mobile, and some PFAS bioaccumulate in human bodies. These chemicals have no known degradation pathways in the environment, which means that they stay in surface water, groundwater, wildlife, and people's bodies, and are passed down through generations from mother to child through umbilical cord blood and breastfeeding. The Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry at the CDC suggests that PFAS has been linked to pregnancy-induced hypertension and preeclampsia, liver damage, increased cholesterol, increased risk of thyroid disease, decreased antibody response to vaccines, increased risk of asthma, decreased fertility, and decreased birth weight. The best way to prevent these negative health impacts and the continued environmental contamination is to stop using products that have these chemicals in them. So we're doing that in this bill in Article 4. The bill prohibits the manufacture, distribution, and sale of several products, including home and commercial furnishings, cookware, cosmetics, children's products, ski wax, and firefighting foam. The bill also requires manufacturers of products with intentionally added PFAS to file a disclosure notice that includes a description of the product, what function is being performed by adding PFAS, the amount and types of PFAS added, and contact information for the manufacturer. This would be publicly available so that consumers know which products PFAS is in, which products they might be using that include PFAS. There's also some requirements for the Department of Health to set water quality standards in here for certain PFAS. And this is a prevalent chemical. It's pretty much everywhere at this point in everyone's bodies. It's very toxic and harmful, and we're making an attempt here to ban it in a lot of products so that we don't have the continued negative health impacts and the environmental risks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To the author of the bill, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Eklund and Representative Wozlowick. So again, the bill is righting past wrongs, makes a significant investment in conservation, addresses contaminants like PFAS, forever chemicals, lead, cadmium, and other contaminants. And then it also addresses climate change. It has various programs that have a dual effect, conservation and helping out with climate change. Emerald ash borer, we have $11 million. $11 million. Those of you who've had in your communities emerald ash borer, and we've been talking about this, Representative Murphy, I think we've been talking about emerald ash borer since 2009. We have a significant investment in emerald ash borer. That's grants to communities, money for your cities to help address emerald ash borer. That means taking down trees and putting in new trees and putting in trees that are more diverse and more resilient. Pollinators. We have funding for the popular Lawns to Legumes program, probably the most popular environmental program created in the last 3 years. Over 1,600 Minnesota families on a waiting list to invest in changing their lawns from a traditional lawn to a pollinator lawn. For very little money, some of them only want technical assistance, but it takes money to provide that technical assistance. We have a multifamily composting pilot program, Representative Agbaje, a zero waste grant program, Representative Hollins, the Minnesota Outdoor Recreation Office, Representative Davney, tourism. As we come out of COVID, with one-time money, we provide over $10 million in grants to communities. So that's for your small town festivals, those are for events. That's to help promote tourism, to help jumpstart that economy as we come out of COVID. Tourism is a huge component of Minnesota, and having your community help promote those events in your communities, we have the dollars for that, $10 million in this bill. Boater education, Representative Cagle, safety education, feedlot financial assurance, and then a variety of policy provisions. There are agency funding projects throughout. You can read that in the bill. And I also want to highlight some of the smaller agencies. Often we don't talk about the Conservation Corps of Minnesota. We provide $500,000 to the Conservation Corps of Minnesota. Those are often when there is a weather event, it's the Conservation Corps that's on site right away. And those efforts of young people in the Conservation Corps have lifelong effects. I think Representative Acom used to be in the Conservation Corps a couple years ago. Metropolitan Council, we provide funding, again, for infrastructure, whether it's inflow infiltration or lead service lines. The Zoological Board, we provide some money to continue groundbreaking research at the Minnesota Zoo, and $500,000 for the Science Museum. Again, the Science Museum, a critical thing for education in Minnesota. We're investing in the Science Museum to help the next generation learn more about the environment. We also provide some money to the University of Minnesota for a soil health action plan. So with that, members, I will sit down and we can take some amendments.
Yes, we will. There are amendments at the desk. The clerk will report the first amendment.
Sundin moves to amend Senate File Number 4062, the unofficial engrossment. The amendment is coded A22-0450.
To the member from Carlton, Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This amendment addresses an issue that was brought up by a contractor, manufacturer in my district. that manufactures septic tanks. Now, they're about approximately 3 inches thick septic tanks, and there's a drain hole in the bottom of some of them that are manufactured in the fall of the year, and if they're not ready for delivery, they have to sit there. And rather than the frost and water that's contained in them, you know, due to snow and that type of thing, they need to drain that out. So there's a hole in the very bottom of them to drain that water out. It's a hole about the size of your ink pen, and it's plugged with a nylon product with a mastic around it and seals it up. And I'll swear to God that nylon plug is going to last longer than the concrete that it's patching. Now, this is a rare occasion, and I believe the MPCA should be on the ball and develop and cooperate with these contractors, develop a plan to actually certify this plug, rather than having to destroy the perfectly good septic tank that's ready for shipping. So I'm looking for support on this amendment. Thank you for your time.
Discussion to the A22 amendment. The representative from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Sundin, I would encourage a no vote on the Sundin amendment. I understand the importance of this in your district. However, the potential risk for this technology, it's not quite there yet in terms of whether it's ready for rapid deployment. So I would ask for a no vote, and I would encourage Representative Sundin to continue working with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency.
The representative from Crow Wing, Representative Heitzman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Sundin yield to a question?
He sure will. Representative Sundin. Oh, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Representative Heitzman, you got to ask the question first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll get this straight one way or the other. Representative Sundin, you know, you brought this forward in committee, and I thought it was a really interesting discussion. And you might have mentioned this, but I just want to try to recall, is there any other place in the country where this has been done, or is this something that's a groundbreaking technology that could be pioneered here in Minnesota? Maybe it's something that's already been tried. I'm trying to remember, and I just couldn't.
Representative Sundin.
Well, thank you for those observations, but this is very low tech. It's a plug that goes in a hole, okay? It was not designed or researched on a space station. It's a plug in a septic tank. It is that simple.
Representative Heitzman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I needed a clarification after Representative Hansen's comment that this wasn't ready for prime time. I thought it sounded pretty basic. I'm not sure what the holdup is and why we would consider voting no. I would encourage the body to vote yes. It's simple, folks. It gets cold in Minnesota. These things are stored outside. Manufacturers put them together with the highest degree of care. But if a small amount of water is able to infiltrate that tank during storage and is not able to escape, it makes sense. A little hole would allow that out. So I'm totally confused as to how this couldn't be ready. This makes great sense, and I hope that members would vote yes.
Representative Backer.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker and members, one of the things I hear out in my neck of the woods is the high cost of septic tanks. I have a nephew who yesterday became a father for the first time, moved into a home in Representative Anderson's district, and they had to redo the septic tank because they can't use this type of common sense. This amendment's common sense, folks. This will help people, especially new homeowners, live within their means, because as we know, owning homes is extremely costly. So I thank you, Representative Sundin. This is a good amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would ask if Representative Sundin would take a question.
He will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Sundin, how much pressure is there in a septic tank?
Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know. I've never spent a whole lot of time in a septic tank.
Representative Green.
Thank you for that answer, I guess. I don't think that there's any. And so I'm wondering how these plugs would fall out. I think this is a good amendment. In fact, I think it's so good, I'm going to ask for a roll call.
Roll call having been requested, there will be a roll call. Further discussion. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would the author yield, please? Thank
He
you,
will yield,
Mr.
yes.
Speaker. And Representative Sundin, does this apply to those of us who may already have concrete septic tanks?
Representative Sundin.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Speaker. Representative, no, those septic tanks that are installed have nothing to do with this particular fix on one that is actually in storage in a yard.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Further discussion to the A22 amendment. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I would ask for a no vote on this. The question is on the nylon, does it break down over time? So it's the issue over time. You could put this in, and we don't know the long-term effects. So is it, the author of the amendment talked about it being groundbreaking. What we're concerned about is it ground leaking? So I'd ask for a no vote on the amendment.
To the author of the amendments, Representative Sundin.
There are several, excuse me, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and just in the response, there are several components that are buried in the ground from time to time. My first job as a young lad, I was a grave digger, and I've seen some of the vaults that are used, and they're sealed up, and there's a lot of technology that goes in there to make certain those vaults that hold the human body that's full of chemicals, we know that, and plastic. The technology has existed for years to protect the environment from leakage, and this is a good measure. It's good business. You know, I know that people think there's overreach sometimes from the MPCA. They do a ton of good work, but this is absolutely frivolous to not take this amendment.
The clerk will take the roll to the A22 amendment. The clerk will call the names of the members that have not yet voted.
Bernardi.
No.
Bernardi, no. Davids.
David's aye.
David's aye. Franzen. Franzen. Hamilton.
Hamilton aye.
Hamilton, aye. Hanson, J.
Hanson J, no.
Hanson, J, no. Hausman.
Houseman, no.
Hausman, no. Mason.
Mason, no.
Mason, no. McDonald. McDonald, aye. New Brindley. New Brindley. Quam.
Aye.
Quam, aye. Thompson.
Thompson, no.
Thompson, no. Zhang Ti.
Zhang Ti, no.
Zhang Ti, no. Franzen.
Franson, yes.
Franzen, aye. New Brindley. New Brindley.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 63 ayes and 66 noes, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Eklund moves to amend Senate File Number 4062, the unofficial engrossment. The amendment is coded A6.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Kuchiching, Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a highly controversial amendment. I want to thank Representative Cagle for a good voter safety bill that she put in. All this does is the houseboat companies are in the rental business. They rent their houseboats, plus they rent little boats, so we just wanted to have houseboats listed as part of this bill. I ask for your yes vote.
Further discussion to the, what do we got here? The A6 amendments. Further discussion. Seeing no further discussion, to the author of the amendment, Representative Eklund.
Please vote yes.
Members, all those in favor of the A6 amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
IGO moves to amend Senate File Number 4062, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A8.
To the member from Itasca, Representative Igo, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this amendment today is to help one of my communities that I think all of us in this state hold a little dear. So everyone knows we have a state portrait. That portrait is the picture of Grace. And right now, the home of the portrait of Grace, Bovey, Minnesota, which is proudly in my district, is under threat from rising pit waters. So the Canisteo pit mine was, an old iron mine. It's part of actually the state's legacy mines now. It expands. It's quite a large lake now. It's over 1,300 acres with 26 miles of shoreline. And what's happening is the natural water level is rising. And as we've seen across the state here, especially these past few weeks, this wet, rainy spring has added to that. So right now, on average, the pit mine the lake is rising about 5 feet a year. And per DNR estimates, we're about 14 feet away from the pit to start naturally dewatering. Well, members, naturally dewatering means that the pit level would overflow and start destroying the cities of Bovey and Coleraine. So this amendment today is to move some money that's appropriated in the bill to the DNR so they can fund all the engineering they've done to save these two cities and these communities. The Canisteo pit is, first off, it's a beautiful lake now. It's what you want to see in reclamation. When I was younger, before the water levels got too high, it had boat accesses. People would fish it. Obviously, beautiful shoreline. In fact, as a kid, my parents would take me there, and because it's such a deep pit, 360 feet deep, you could pull up to one of the beaches and actually find fossils alongside the beach because it is just this natural, beautiful water clarity of 70, 80 feet deep. Again, goes to show how northeastern Minnesota is the cleanest waters in the state. But we have to do something today. This is the number one priority of my cities and my district. This is also the number one priority of my county in Itasca. I'm really hoping we can see this as a friendly amendment and add some funding to this bill to take care of this so we aren't seeing FEMA jackets in Itasca County when this tailings basin wall breaks because the water's rising. This is a legacy of the state. It is our duty to take care of this. I hope we can have your support today. Thank you.
There is an amendment to the amendments. The clerk will report the amendments.
Sandsted moves to amend the IGO amendment to Senate File number 4062, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A20.
To the member from St. Louis, Representative Sandsted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What my amendment to the amendment does is it is only asking for $850,000, which is needed for operations and maintenance. Currently, the Canisteo pit is in the House bonding bill. This is a project that I've been working on since I've been elected to the House, 6 years. We finally look like we're going to get this across the finish line. $850,000 is not a bondable expense. It is a portion that is used, again, for operations and maintenance. We need both elm tree replacement from the Emerald Ash Borer, and we need the operations and maintenance. So my amendment to this amendment achieves both.
Discussion. Representative Eklund.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask Representative Representative. That's my ego. Anyway, Representative Igo, if you'd yield to a couple questions.
Representative Sandsted, will you yield for a question?
I will, however, I think it was directed at Representative Igo.
Apologies. Representative Igo. He will yield. Representative Eklund.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Igo, did you get the latest news report that Emerald Ash Borer has moved into Lake County now, as well as St. Louis County?
Representative Igo.
Yeah, I was aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If Representative Igo would continue to yield.
He will yield. Representative Eklund.
Representative Igo, do we have a new facility that's proposed to be built in your district? Wood products facility?
Representative Igo.
Yes, we do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that's interesting that you take away funding from the Emerald Ash Borer to fix this, and I know we need to fix this, but that's a significant amount. Representative Igo, would you yield to another question?
He will yield. Representative Eklund.
So, Representative Igo, how many acres of black ash are in Itasca County?
Representative Igo.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Representative, Mr. Speaker. Representative Igo, how many acres of black ash are in Itasca County?
Representative Igo.
You know that number is always fluctuating. I don't know if I know the current number off the top of my head.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, just to refresh your memory, Representative Igo, there's 140,000 plus acres in Itasca County. There's 112,000 plus acres in Coochin County. And there's 173,000 acres in St. Louis County. People probably wonder why I'm bringing up these numbers, but I retired from the forest products industry, and there was something called a species mix when you make your product. So I'm kind of surprised that, Representative Igo, you'd want to take money away from Emerald Ash Borer studies and regenerations when this new wood products plant that's going to be put in Cohasset eventually will probably use some of this ash as part of their species mix, because we have to figure out how to use live ash, Mr. Speaker, and if the ash dies because of Emerald Ash Borer, it will be worth nothing. So it just kind of surprised me that you have this amendment up when we have such an issue moving forward in the state of Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I'd encourage a yes vote on the Sandsted amendment.
Representative Lueck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hopefully you don't need glasses. I'm burdened with them, but no, this is a tough one. I appreciate where Representative Sandsted's going with this amendment. She's going to support perpetuating a pretty serious problem. And that is, it's pretty clear, the engineering folks have looked at the situation, and it's just a matter of time. And we're going to have a very, very serious flooding problem for people in 2 of our cities on the Iron Range. So I suspect that this amendment's going to go on, but I'd be awful careful about putting 2 cities on the Iron Range secondary to the ash problem. Yeah, we all agree it's a problem. So is Dutch Elm. But let's remember here, folks, we got mayors, we got city council folks, we got residents there that don't need to be stuck with flood insurance and all the kind of problems that a flood can create. So, as again, I suspect this amendment's going to go on, but it's a Band-Aid. So we're going to perpetuate the problem instead of fixing the problem. We appreciate that Emerald Ash Borer is working its way across the state of Minnesota. Well, this one's a lot closer. We get, as you say, the rumor is, and some will say it's absolutely sound science. Others will debate that. I know for sure climate's changing. We're getting more water falling out of the skies year for year. That's what's going on right now. That, along with the natural increase in the elevation of that lake, is going to overtop and flood 2 cities. So with a huge, unbelievable amount of dollars, remember, we funded environmental natural resources fully last year. We do have a budget in place. It would seem that this is an opportunity to fix a problem instead of just admiring it, as one of our colleagues, I believe it was Representative Ansel, used to be one of his favorite topics was, here we go again, we're going to admire the problem and not fix it. So, again, if this is the best we can do, this is the best we can do. But I think we continue to put 2 cities at risk for no good reason. We got the money, and the environmental natural resources area is already fully funded. Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the author of the original amendment yield for a question?
He will. Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Igo, help me to wrap my head around this. Would that amendment to the amendment amount be adequate to address the problem, or would we be left something short of what we would want to protect those communities?
Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Bowe. Those dollars would be, in a sense, kicking the can down the road. It's not solving the problem we have at hand. I understand, it was mentioned, the Emerald Ash Borer is also a problem. No one in here is denying that. But what we need to do is address the problem. And the problem is that there's hundreds of families in my district who are at risk of losing their homes when this tailings basin wall breaks if we don't do anything. That's why this amendment would be destructive.
Very good.
Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion.
Mr. Speaker.
To the author of the amendment, Representative Sandstead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to assure the body that should this amendment to the amendment go on, we are not creating a Band-Aid. We are not kicking the can down the road. The project, which I have chief authored for the last 6 years, is also being addressed through the bonding bill. And the majority of the expense is being handled in a bonding bill. It is a bondable project. The last portion that we need to ensure the project is complete and taken care of into the future is the $850,000 that I am asking for in this amendment to the amendment. I understand the severity and the need to complete this project, but that is incumbent upon the body to pass not just an environment bill, but also a bonding bill. And that's for us to decide into the future. It is not admiring the problem. For 6 years, I have been doing anything but admire a problem. I have, even though it's not in my district, as a member of the majority party, I have taken the responsibility to ensure the safety and well-being of Minnesotans, whether they're my constituents or not. So I would hope that we could work together to get this done for the well-being of Minnesotans, for their safety, for a pending disaster, and also consider passing a bonding bill. So we're not admiring problems and we're not kicking a can down the road. As I said earlier, we need both of these pieces. We need the $850,000 for operations and maintenance, and we need to take care of our emerald ash problem or emerald ash borer problem and the replanting of those trees. I do need to clarify that this appropriation is a one-time appropriation that will be used only for operations and maintenance for the next 40 years. I think it's 2063. Not 850,000 every single year, one-time appropriation. And with that, members, I would ask for your support.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, the A20, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. To the amendment, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, we just need to prioritize that we're taking care of families here with this bill. A little disappointed that we moved the dollars amount down, but it's a step in the right direction. I would encourage everyone's support. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the A8 amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
O'Driscoll moves to amend Senate File Number 4062, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A10.
The member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill, or this amendment, I should say, is a bill that's been working its way through the legislature this year. We've been working on it for about 2 or 3 years, and it is corrections that came to us regarding the school trust lands office and how we manage the school trust lands. And the OLA had some recommendations that are included in this particular provision. And we also have some clarification of duties of the school trust lands office. And what had happened when this bill was introduced and had the support of the commission, in one chamber it found its way into the education bill, and in the other chamber it found its way into the environment bill. And what I'm offering today in the A10 is the exact same language that we had in the bill for the House, and the same language that we had in the Senate, which is the agreed upon language, to get it lined up so that we have it in the right order for the conference committee when that should occur. So members, I ask for a green vote on the A10 amendment today, technical in nature.
Discussion to the A10 amendment. The representative from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd encourage a yes vote on the O'Driscoll amendment.
To the author of the amendment, Representative O'Driscoll.
I echo the chair's sentiments. Vote yes.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the A10 amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Wow. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Swazinski moves to amend Senate File Number 4062, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A14.
Okay, Representative Swazinski. From the member from Lyon, Representative Swazinski, would you please introduce your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. The A14 Amendment is a pretty straightforward amendment. The amendment simply expands the use of rifles for deer hunting across the state. Under current Minnesota law, we have the northern portion of the state, we can use rifles and shotguns. In the southern part of the state, we have essentially what's called a shotgun zone. And with the changing technology, with the advancement of rifle-calibered pistols, we've seen a great increase and a great adaption where a lot more hunters and opening the door to a lot more hunters, the use of rifle-calibered pistols throughout the state. And this amendment would essentially just add a few inches of barrel to the guns that we use to harvest deer across the state. So currently, 308, 30-06, 243, 223, those calibers are used in northern Minnesota, and those calibers are used in southern Minnesota. It's just in the deliverance of using a rifle-calibered pistol. And, from an adaption standpoint, we always like to hear stories. And when my wife's been a lifetime hunter, has taken many deer in her years, had the opportunity to change to a rifle-calibered pistol, she did. And our children are looking to do the same thing because of the amount of kick. A 12 gauge and a 20 gauge. I'm sure if any of you has ever taken a deer or shot anything with a 20 gauge or 12 gauge, the opportunity for, getting your shoulder pounded is pretty high. But if you use a rifle-calibered pistol, it's a lot less kick, it's a lot more control, and we all know that rifles are more accurate than pistols. And so this has a safety. There's very little research. A lot of folks felt like, this was in place for safety reasons. The DNR did a lot of research, and it wasn't. It was more for a deer management. And, other states have made this move in the past. Wisconsin, I think, believed that it got rid of their last shotgun zone approximately 7 years ago, and they've had no increase in damages. And most of the research points that shotguns, there's more injuries than rifles because of the type of hunting that's done and the rest. And so this amendment is very straightforward. It just simply strikes the area that carves out Minnesota, southern Minnesota, for shotgun zones and just allows folks to have the choice. And that's really what we want to do is, if you're a young lady like my daughter's getting into hunting, that they have the choice to either use a shotgun or a rifle, or adults as well. And so for that, I'd like to take any questions. This bill is also supported by the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association. They have passed it through their regulation. They want this to have their opportunity. A lot of this is growth when they're looking to try to grow the sport. And how do they get new young people into the sport? And they felt that from a guarantee that this will make a big difference to get young women and other folks into the sport as well. And also the gun groups support this as well, and the Minnesota DNR. So the conservation officers, this was moved forward through their policy bill, the governor's policy bill, and we really feel that this is just a straightforward amendment, and we'd appreciate your support. And I'm open to questions.
Discussion to the A14 Amendment. To the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Swedzinski. I think we've had good discussions on this over the years. I'm going to recommend a no vote on the Swedzinski Amendment. I actually hunt in the South, and I've checked with folks who aren't usually connected, may not even be a member of an organization. I've talked to landowners, and it is a very mixed bag in terms of there's some people who really, really, really want this. There's some people who really, really, really don't want this. And so I think it'd be important. I know the other body has a portion on this. They actually excluded some areas. But I'm going to ask for a no vote now. We've talked about this for several years. I think we will continue to talk about that. But I would ask for a no vote on the Swedzinski Amendment.
Further discussion to the A14. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's the member from Carver.
Yep.
Well, Mr. Chair, I actually hunt just down the road from where you are in the South. And I have talked to a number of people who are I'll scoot over here so we can see each other. I have talked to a number of people down there, and they anxiously look forward to being able to use a rifle. They find that it would be a lot better for the harvesting of animals. And, you know, so I hunt in a number of different states, many of whom have the same restriction that has been lifted. I hunt in Nebraska, which is much flatter than even down in Harmony, where you and I both hunt. No problems, as Representative Swedzinski had said, there have been none reported, and I think that this is a very good provision. I think that this increases, honestly, the number of younger hunters who are going to hunt, because putting a young kid on a 20 gauge even is somewhat abrupt on their shoulder, as Representative Swedzinski talked about. Beyond that, I think that this drives greater accuracy of your shot placement, and I think that this is a very good amendment. I think that this is well past due, in my opinion. So I encourage a yes vote on this. I think it's a very good thing. So thank you.
To the member from Sherborne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Going to dig out, as you guys all enjoy, stories from work in the past. As a firearms instructor, when we do qualifications, our name tags were always on the top of your pocket. It was right here, or right where the shotgun butt plate would be if you weren't holding it real correctly. And I think some of the police supply agencies really enjoyed when we did shotgun qualifications, because out of 70 people, the younger deputies that weren't smart enough or hadn't learned, because they've had to order 3 new name tags, would learn to take their name tags off before they did the shotgun qualification, because it would bend, because shooting a shotgun slug has a heck of a wallop. As Representative Nash indicated, it'll lead to increased accuracy, because it'll lead to decreased flinching if we have people shooting rifles that do not have the wallop of shooting a 12-gauge slug. And the second thing, will the author of the amendment yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Swedzinski, I'm fairly familiar with the statutes. Can you just clarify for me, and I think you kind of hit it on it a little bit, but could you just clarify that under current statutes, I could take a Thompson centerfire handheld pistol and I could put a .308 cartridge in that, and that would be legal for hunting in southern Minnesota if it's in the Thompson centerfire pistol, which has a shorter barrel and doesn't have the added accuracy that you would get with hunting with a rifle. But if I take that same cartridge and put it in a rifle that I would be able to have glass, then you would be able to, that would not currently be legal?
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Representative Novotny. So yes, that Thompson centerfire pistol that you could put a .308 or 300 Win Mag cartridge in, you could use as a pistol, but you couldn't use it in a rifle. Yes. So a shorter, less accurate pistol is legal, but the longer barreled rifle would be illegal. But it's legal to take coyotes, it's legal to take vermin, all that sort of thing, to help our pheasant populations in the same area, though, but not for deer hunting.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you for that clarification, because it seems to make really good sense. I don't know why we would be against that, but thank you for clarifying that for me. Thank you.
The representative from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would the author of the amendment yield?
He will yield. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I believe several urban areas where they have some parks and other areas that are open to bow only. And do you think that there would be the possibility in certain areas that there could be some localized shifting different from this rule, or is this a universal? If there's, if you could talk on that general subject.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you. You know, generally, Representative, thank you, Mr. Speaker, Representative Quam. So yes, there are specialized hunts that often do happen within cities and local units of government. And oftentimes those regulations are dictated by those units of government. So if you referred to the city of Byron potentially having a bow hunt to kind of decrease the populations of urban deer hunting, or urban deer, you know, they regulate that. So this law would not overact that. So, you know, if the city wanted to pass a regulation to have a rifle hunt, they could. You know, sometimes cities do that where they bring in sharpshooters to use rifle to take out deer if there's an overpopulation and they can't get enough volunteers to do bow hunting. And some cities choose not to do open bow hunts. But in general, those local units of governments do have some control over what is used. So it would not overrule that.
Representative Quam.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative. And I do recall that in my area down by Olmsted and Dodge County, there have been rifle hunts for CWD and other variations. I just wanted to make sure people were aware of that might be scared that this would affect some of those special hunts in urban areas, that it doesn't. Thank you.
The representative from Anoka, Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To take this a little bit of a different direction, one of the things that I appreciate about this body and our ability to have these conversations is we bring together people from all over the state of Minnesota, and we have subject matter experts in certain areas. And this happens to be an area where I am a subject matter expert. I've been a weapons instructor since I was 18 years old. I hold an expert infantryman's badge from the United States Army. I've been a permit to carry instructor for well over 17 years. I'm nationally rifle certified on shotgun, rifle, and pistol. I've studied this bill, or this amendment, I should say, and from my professional opinion, this does advance safety. It does advance our sport. And I had an opportunity this morning to speak with one of the owners of the Metro Gun Club up in my area in Blaine. And we talked about the shooting sports in general. And one thing I would like to share with the body here today, Mr. Speaker, is I don't know if the body knows this, but there are more high school students that are involved in trap shooting than there are in hockey, in the state of hockey here in Minnesota. This is a great opportunity for us to expand expand this program, the ability for us to do it in a way that is proven to be safe across the state. And this looks like a very good amendment that will help the hunters here in Minnesota. I'm a yes on this, and I would encourage all the members of the House to look at it from the standpoint of what it's going to do. And if there are any questions before we do take a vote, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The representative from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Swazinski, for the amendment. I think this is a great amendment. Not only those for wanting the freedom as they are out hunting to be able to use a rifle or a shotgun or a pistol, but it just makes sense all the right way around from the research. Members, I sent you what I understand to be, because I began querying this subject several years ago, the only piece of research that we're aware of, that our crack house research staff is aware of in the country, about comparing exactly this issue from a safety perspective, the safety of rifles versus shotguns in deer hunting. And that happened in the state of Pennsylvania. I sent you the study. Essentially, that particular study said that under normal hunting conditions, the rifles are actually safer than shotguns. So I encourage you to read that study. That's very clear. Additionally, members, I grew up in the state of Wisconsin, and I've hunted in Wisconsin since I was 7 or 8. I began with a stick, of course. And when you're hunting with a group, of course, those of you that haven't hunted deer before, if you want to see a deer and you're hunting with a group, carry a stick. and you'll get in close contact right away. They come right for you. So I've been hunting in Wisconsin for a long time, including when it was only shotgun only in the state of Wisconsin, and then there were several adaptations for several parts of the state to allow rifles, and then in 2013, 9 years ago, they actually allowed rifles statewide in the state of Wisconsin. I'm going to read to you, I was on the Wisconsin DNR's website, and they have a chronology of all the changes in their deer hunting season that have occurred over time for the last 100 years or more. In 2013, this particular citation says, in 2013, rifles allowed for hunting statewide after research shows they pose no greater risk than shotguns, even in more populated counties. That's the first sentence in the Wisconsin DNR's document that they have on their website, looking at the chronology of hunting deer in the state of Wisconsin. So from a safety perspective, which I think the author of the amendment pointed out very clearly, is not the reason we have this prohibition in law, this restriction in law to begin with. It was for deer management, apparently. Back then, they wanted less deer to be harvested, so they implemented rules that restricted or made it harder to kill deer and be accurate with deer, with shooting deer, like the rifle offers us. It offers us the ability to be accurate. I would be interested in a study that looked at, because I have hunted with both and I hunt a lot, and I can tell you that the number of shots per deer with a shotgun, especially when you're hunting it as a group, is much greater than the number of shots taken with a rifle in order to kill that same deer. And that leads me to my next point, members. Those of you that are concerned about lead in the environment, a Sabot shotgun slug weighs 438 grains if it's 1 ounce, 438 grains of lead per shot. The average rifle cartridge sends out about a 150 grain bullet on average. So about 3 times the amount of lead deposited in the environment with a shotgun slug as is with a rifle round. And if you factor in that you're going to have 2 or 3 times more shots from the shotgun than you are from the rifle to kill the same deer, you're probably going to have even more, maybe 3, 6, 9, or 10 times more lead placed in the environment if you're shooting a shotgun versus a rifle. If that's a concern of yours, that's something to think about with this amendment. But what's brought forward by people, I think, reflexively, because Representative Swazinski, I've talked to a lot of my hunters too, and others that have talked here. Representative Hansen, thank you for discussing this. They always bring up safety without actually knowing what the safety research and the experience has been. And the reality is, rifles offer the hunter the ability not only to very clearly see the target, our number 3 item in gun safety for those others like me that have taught gun safety, be able to see the target clearly and the area behind them clearly. The scope on a rifle gives you much more ability to be very, very sure of that than somebody on average hunting with a shotgun and sometimes shooting in the brush or other places. So the safety is much greater actually with a rifle. With that, Mr. Speaker and members, I encourage a yes vote on the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To the representative from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if we're gonna talk about subject matter experts, I would remind folks that maybe you aren't the subject matter expert on what women who hunt want the regulations to be. And one thing I do want to point out, I think this is an issue that's been debated for a long time. I think there are good points on both sides, but I think when we're talking about changing hunting regulations, if we don't know that it's going to make us safer, we should pause and think about that. And as long as we are talking about firearms, I do want to mention, and I think this is a thing that I've not don't quite have the subject matter expertise as Representative Raleigh, but I am a DNR certified firearm safety instructor, have grown up around guns and own both rifles and shotguns. And one thing I did, I actually read an article today that the rate of firearm-related deaths of all types, including suicide, homicide, and unintentional, among youth ages 1 to 19 increased nearly 30% from 2019 to 2020. And so cannot pass up this moment to remind folks about safe storage and doing the things that we need to do to keep people safe. To the amendment, I'm sorry if folks have trouble with flinching when they shoot shotguns. You do have to train that out of yourself sometimes. But I think, given especially I think the broad nature of this language, it isn't just simply saying, yes, you can use shotgun or you can use a rifle in the shotgun zone. It's all legal firearms may be used statewide. So it's actually changing more than what's going on in the southern part of the state. It could potentially have impacts that are larger than that. And so I think the safest thing to do and probably the smartest thing to do at this point is to vote this down, and I hope members will do that. Thank you.
To the member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Say just a couple of things to consider as far as safety. There's no evidence whatsoever to indicate that it's not safer if Representative Swazinski's amendment gets passed. So that's just silly to even suggest such a thing. We have to look at our neighboring states, and safety is not an issue with rifle hunting. But three things to consider, and I'll be brief. The DNR a couple of years ago came out with a report saying that youth hunting and youth outdoor activities of all kinds is down. So if you want to propagate and lift up the youth and give them more opportunity to become hunters and to learn the beautiful family traditions of hunting, then this bill, this amendment, would actually help advance that, especially in the South, in the Southern. The other thing to consider is that for wounded deer, there is less wounded deer with a shotgun, with a rifle, a good 30-30. I've hunted both in the South and the North, and I'm more accurate with a 30-30 than you are in a shotgun. So for those who are considering a no vote because you think it's not safe, that simply is not the case. So put that in your bank. That's false. And it's better for the environment. It's better for the deer because you're more accurate. And it's better for the youth who we want to make sure that continue the beautiful tradition of hunting in the state of Minnesota. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Chair?
To the representative from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Becker-Finn, I have 3 daughters and a wife, all of whom I've taught how to hunt, and both with a centerfire rifle and a shotgun. And I'm not trying to be controversial here, but each of them have said, Dad or Jim, they prefer to pull the trigger on a rifle. They are just more comfortable. And I agree that you can teach to work a flinch out. I've helped many people work flinches out after they were taught by a bad instructor. But the three daughters and my wife have all said they would rather pull the trigger on a centerfire rifle. And it's just fact. In my house, that's what they have said. I've taught other women how to shoot. And they have all said, you know what, if I have my choice, I'd rather have a centerfire rifle. And it's just the way it is. This is about, we shouldn't cloud this issue with false safety narratives and trying to talk that out of existence. Because again, for those that are certified safety instructors and hunters instructors, what is it you teach them? The first rule is know what you're shooting at and take a responsible shot. So conflating that this is unsafe is, I think, an inaccurate argument. This is a good amendment. Other states, I lived in Nebraska, still hunt in Nebraska, way flatter. They allow modern rifles, and in an area where I lived, I could be in my vehicle, leaving work, 25 minutes later, I'm in my deer stand. So we're still around a populated area. Nobody had concerns. There were no reported injuries. There were no reported deaths. This is an issue that you are trying to make out of something that doesn't actually live up to what it is you're saying. Thank you.
To the representative from Carlton, Representative Sundin.
I'm going to tell you a little story. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to tell you a little story about a kid, young teenager. His name was Sylvester. And he and his buddy used to love going out hunting together. And, you know, kids are going to be kids, or young people are going to be young people. You know, a male, I understand, isn't completely intellectually mature until they're about 25. So I'm getting close to that myself. So that said, they were out hunting one day, and I don't know if it was something impulsive, something reckless, but that's what young people do. We're all guilty of it. Sooner or later, as a kid growing up, you're going to do something impulsive, you're going to do something reckless. And Sylvester shot his best friend. And there they were, out in the field, there with his dead friend laying on the ground. Okay? It's not the gun's fault. It was Sylvester's fault. He did something impulsive, something reckless. I don't know which it was, but I never got to meet Sylvester. Or his friend, for that matter, but the family still is haunted by the fact that Sylvester shot his friend. And my wife talks about it quite a little bit. Sylvester was her father. So not only the family of the dead person has been affected by this, but the survivors too. The point is, young people do impulsive things, young people do reckless things. I can speak to personal experience on that, and I'm sure everybody in this room can as well. But that said, that's the reason to not put high-velocity projectiles in the hands of young people. Okay, I trust the firearm training that we talked about. You know, my children went through it, I went through it, and it's a good thing, but young people still do impulsive things, reckless things. That said, kind of from an ag angle on this, I grew up on a farm, nice little dairy farm, and hunters would come and they would ask, can we hunt your fields? Can we hunt around here? And they were very courteous about it. And we'd tell them, no over here, here's the cows here, here's the buildings here, here's where you're going to be shooting. And that was okay. But there's 2 hills in our farm. You couldn't even see the other side of the farm because of the trees or the hills. But that's up in Couchiching County. Now down in Martin County or wherever else south of the Twin Cities here, it's not wooded. It's flat land. And I don't want impulsive or reckless kids or anybody with a high projectile firearm taking down cattle or dairy farms. Would Representative Anderson yield for a question?
Representative Anderson. Yes, he will yield. Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, you know, if you got a good chunk of beef on 4 hoofs out in the field there or out in the pasture, what is that thing worth?
Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Well, depending on if you're talking about a cow or a big calf or a bull, but I would say $1,000 to $2,000 probably. Value of an average beef critter.
Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's good to know. But with the dairy herds that are out there, with the genetics, what they are, you know, advanced genetics and very controlled genetics on a dairy herd, I'm understanding that they could be quite a bit more than that. Mr. Speaker, if Representative Anderson would yield to that question.
He will yield. Representative Anderson.
You're asking what I think the price of a valuable dairy animal would be worth, correct? Well, dairy is not my forte, but as you mentioned, yeah, there's a lot of high-end caliber breeding with dairy cattle. I wouldn't venture a guess. Several thousand for sure would be the value of a high-priced dairy cattle, yes.
Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Anderson. So the point is, you know, reckless kids, irresponsible kids can cause accidents. And even the best intended firearm user could take down literally tens of thousands of dollars worth of dairy herd, or maybe just a couple $1,000s of beef herd. But either way, that's a paycheck. That's a paycheck for a farmer. We don't want to see that. We don't have to see it. Vote no on this amendment, please.
To the member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Sundin yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Sundin, youth are very important to me, and I want to make sure they're safe, but I do have a question for you. You're indicating that reckless youth are will be in more danger if we should adopt this amendment and eventually adopt the law. So can you please cite the research that shows in the states that already have, hunters have the ability to use these types of weapons and so on, what research would show that youth are at more danger or have died more, been wounded more in those states versus Minnesota here?
Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry I can't address what goes on in other states. I'm just referring to the general irresponsibility that a lot of youth do exhibit.
Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Sundin, thank you, but I think data is important. And there is no data that supports that there's any danger, any more danger in opening up Minnesota compared to these other states. It simply is not there. And I have researched it because I was concerned initially with the safety issues of this particular amendment. But after studying it, the research simply supports that it's safe and it's okay. And youth are not at danger. And I agree, youth are reckless and so on. But the data does not support what you said. So as much as that pulls on the heartstrings, Mr. Speaker, I believe we need to look at research here. And the research does not support that. And I do support this amendment. So thank you, Representative Swedzinski, for bringing it up.
Next, we have the representative from Clearwater, Representative Grossel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, listening to some of this, I'm going, you're not giving the sportsmen and women of this state any credit. You're not giving them any credit at all by limiting them to just using shotguns. And Representative Sundin, that's a tragic story. That's a tragic story, but whether a shotgun or a rifle, the results would have been just as horrific. And recklessness is recklessness, and that's where we should be teaching our youth how to safely handle and use a firearm. Not making a mystery to them. Don't do that to them, because that's when people get hurt, is when they don't know something, know anything about these types of subjects. But to help them to learn and to keep them safe from the elementary school on up. Teach them. I grew up in a hunting family, military family, law enforcement environment. My kids grew up that way too. And I taught them. I taught them the proper usage of firearms. Not to mess around, not to play any games, not to be careless with them. But the first thing I taught them was safety. In every hunting family that I've ever been around, at least in my area, in my group, no matter what environment you're hunting in, safety is always first. That's what the sportsmen and women do. Safety is always first. Now, I hunt on just as flat a land as anybody in the state. Hundreds of yards of wide open space. So you check the areas, you check the surroundings, and you place your stands, your deer stands, in an area that is safe so that you can fire. You have your lanes of fire. Where not to shoot, where you can shoot safely. That's what sportsmen and women do. So to say that this amendment shouldn't go on, that the southern part of the state should not be allowed to use rifles, like I said, you're not giving them any credit. they will be just as safe as anybody else in the state because some of them have said they go to other states. They hunt on flatlands just fine. Other states around us, it's wide open. So this is not a safety issue because again, these are the sportsmen and women that have gone through the trainings, that have years of experience with firearms, that are going to use them in a safe and proper manner. It is just opening our state up to let everybody enjoy the sport however they want to use it. If they want to continue to use a shotgun, nothing's stopping them. If they want to switch to a rifle, well, why not let them? It's not hurting anything. It's not hurting anything. And if there has been a rise in young people's suicide, it isn't because of the firearms. It isn't because of the access to firearms. It's been because of what's been hammered on them for the past few years. Isolation, that kind of stuff. So this amendment isn't about any of that stuff. This amendment is about opening our state up, just like the rest of them around us, and allowing our sportsmen and women and their families to enjoy the hunting seasons. That's all it is. So I ask you to support this.
Next is the representative from Isanti, Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Deer hunting is one of those traditions in Minnesota that I think we all enjoy. I have deer hunted since I was 12, or maybe even earlier than that, actually, probably with my dad or my uncle. And I remember hunting with my grandfather, and it's just one of those really rich Minnesota traditions. But deer hunting also serves another purpose. It's how we manage the deer population and the deer herd, and do that in a healthy way to make sure that we don't have overpopulation. And just in my time hunting, now I've shot a lot of deer in my life. I don't really hunt now to go and shoot a deer, and I pass on more than I even think about shooting. And I'll be honest, the only reason I still go in the woods is because now I hunt with my 14-year-old nephew. And for me, it's about making sure that he has that opportunity and that experience. And it's fun for me to share that with him and experience it with him. So that's why I still hunt. I'm not a big fan of venison, although my family likes it. But I have seen the laws change over the years and modernize. And we have worked on this particular issue. I know a lot of members have. I haven't directly, personally, although I support it very much. In my dozen years in the legislature now, I think this one has been worked on, I think, that whole time. This is the first time that this actually, the DNR is on board with this. It's in the governor's, the DNR's recommendations to make this change. It is a safety change. I know that people that aren't familiar with hunting and aren't familiar with firearms sometimes see them as scary, and I understand that. I get how things that are unfamiliar sometimes are, but literally the data is clear, and the data shows that hunting with a rifle is safer. It not only is safer for the individuals and the environment around the hunter, it's also safer for the animals. You get a better opportunity for a cleaner kill with less opportunity to injure an animal and have that animal run off and not be found or something like that. So it's a much more humane way to do this. It's a much safer way. And I want to just impress on everybody too, these calibers can already be used. This bill doesn't allow you to use any calibers that can't currently be used. It's just a matter of what the gun looks like. You can put these same cartridges, these same bullets, into a gun that's called a pistol, which has a shorter barrel, and hunt with them legally in all of the state right now. This literally is just modernizing our hunting regulations to allow them to be used actually in a gun that makes them safer. So this really is a safety issue, but if you're against this, you're actually keeping us in a system and regulations that are actually less safe. And I hunt in an area of the state that is a shotgun zone, where we use shotgun. I currently hunt with a 12 gauge, always a slug. I remember when I was a kid and they outlawed the buckshot, where it actually had multiple projectiles in the same shell. That was a modernization of our regulations, right? Getting rid of that. For most of my life, you couldn't hunt with a .223 or a .556 caliber because that was considered to be too small of a caliber. Well, we've modernized our regulations, and they realized that that is a perfectly acceptable and very safe caliber to hunt with. So I appreciate there is concern about this. I assure you that those of us who hunt and have hunted for years have studied and looked into this, and we know that it is safer to hunt with a rifle in every aspect. Can an accident still happen? It most certainly can. But that's why we train our youth, and through this tradition that we have in the state of Minnesota, that not only is a rich tradition that's passed down in our families and shared amongst our families, but it is how we manage the deer population here in the state of Minnesota. So I would encourage folks to just not think that this is a political thing. It most certainly is not. This governor and his DNR, his current DNR, are supporting this. It is in their recommended proposals that they wanted passed this year. It's in their proposal. The DNR, Governor Walz, this DNR, his DNR commissioner, they support this, right? This is not an issue where people are going to be less safe because they're hunting with a rifle. I assure you, they will be more safe. The data is absolutely clear on that. So please don't get wrapped up into that this might be a political thing or it's a gun thing. It is a safety thing, but I assure you it is safer, and you don't have to look far to find the results of that. Wisconsin modernized their laws, I think it was 7 years ago. That's what I was told. I know that they did it within the last 10 years. I think it was 7 years ago. It worked there. It has been safe. And as I said, it's actually safer. So let's not stop ourselves from doing something that is smart and is safe and really is what sportsmen who know about this sport and participate in it and have done so for a long time, let's listen to them and follow them. This is what they want. They're a responsible group of people who understands what it means to safely and humanely harvest one of our natural resources, in our deer population, and do that through our hunting seasons. Our DNR now has joined with the Deer Hunters Association to say that this is something that we need to do, as other states around us have done, and the data shows very clearly this is safe. So I would ask people to really look to those that participate in this and have studied it. Let's listen to the DNR. Let's listen to this governor's administration, our DNR commissioner, and this DNR who are recommending this policy. It's long overdue, and I think it's time that we modernize our hunting laws to make them more safer for folks here in Minnesota. So I would encourage a yes vote. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion to the A14 amendment. To the author of the amendment, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, and thank you, members. Thank you all for your comments. The detractors to the amendment that cite youth and I think when it comes to familiarization with your tools, and if you're out shooting cattle, that's illegal. If you're doing things that are irresponsible with firearms, that's stupid. So to conflate that and say that, well, if we allow this, folks here in the legislature, you literally can hunt almost everything else in southern Minnesota right now with a rifle. I think you can use, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, I think you can use a .22 for hunting pheasants, if I'm correct. Representative Hansen, am I correct in that? I believe you can. So, no, I was just looking. So, you know, folks, this doesn't have to be a big partisan thing. I think this is just some common sense. Let's modernize our laws. Let's allow people to have the choice. Let's let young people have the opportunity not to have a shotgun kick. I mean, if I've heard anything from folks when I have a lot of folks that come out, we shoot trap and we do whatever out on the farm, church groups and whatever. And one of the biggest fears a lot of the folks have is the kick. And I can't say more than saying allow some folks to make the decision. And that's all we're doing. I had landowners come up to me and say, Chris, why are you doing this? I don't want people to hunt with rifle on my farm. And I said, you have the ability to tell folks not to do that on your land. Oh, okay, no problem. And so just vote yes. And Mr. Speaker, I would like a roll call. Thank you.
Roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members voting remotely, please vote. Will the clerk please call the names of the members that have not voted yet?
Davids.
Davids votes aye.
Davids, aye. Franzen.
Franzen, yes.
Franzen, aye. Hamilton.
Hamilton, aye.
Hamilton, aye. Houseman.
Houseman, no.
Houseman, no. Mason.
Mason, no.
Mason, no. O'Neill. 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 O'Neill.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Heinzman moves to amend Senate File number 4062, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A5.
To the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment was brought to me over the course of trying to answer some questions, actually, as to how MPCA handles required testing for PFAS. And I think that there's a lot of merit in testing. I think we all agree that as an emerging issue, we need to be tracking this and figuring out where it is and how it is affecting Minnesota in various ways, whether it be drinking water or, in this case, I think the discussion is centered around, at least if I'm reading all the language correctly and the statute correctly, dealing with facilities that are processing wastewater. This amendment prohibits the MPCA from forcing facilities to monitor PFAS unless it can be done at no cost to the community that it's affecting, the facility that it's affecting. So this amendment would allow testing to continue if MPCA can find the money to do it. And I think that's critical. And earlier in the discussion today, we're talking a lot about some of the major investment that the underlying bill is making, and I feel like this is an area that has been missed, and I'm trying to highlight that by bringing this up today. And members, just quickly, I'm going to mention a few towns being affected. In fact, there's 91 municipal wastewater treatment plants potentially affected by this. Towns from Albert Lea all the way up to Two Harbors, Hibbing, Hoyt Lakes, Granite Falls. I could go on and on and on. This is something that, on one hand, we're glad to have the testing. But on the other hand, it's a significant cost, and I want to bring attention to this. So hopefully we can continue to look for a solution, because each test can cost up to, it is in the neighborhood of $1,000 to $1,500. That adds up. So I'm hoping that this amendment will affect the issue, and would look forward and appreciate a yes from the body.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from, there we go. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Wasilwick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would encourage a no vote on this amendment for a couple reasons. The process that the MPCA went through to come up with their PFAS monitoring plan was a cooperative process with facilities. And I actually spoke with MPCA about this amendment. And they said if they don't do this testing piece like they're doing it in this way, that they're actually going to have to open up permits for these facilities, which is actually a bigger concern for facilities than this cost of this testing. In fact, the document that Representative Heinzman had sent around from the chamber expressed concern with the time required for these permit processes. So I would encourage members to vote no on this amendment. The MPCA there is some funding in our bill to help with that, but this is a cooperative process with the MPCA and the facilities, and I think both parties need to be putting some funding into this. Thank you.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a county program manager who has budgets on my fingertips all the time, and as a former city council member, I can tell you that a lot of local government entities who are operating these wastewater treatment facilities just don't have extra money available. And would the author of the amendment yield for a question?
He will yield, Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Heinzman, did I hear you say up to $1,500 per test?
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Bowe, thank you for the question. And yeah, $1,500 per test potentially, with some facilities looking at annually tests in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $10,000 a year, which may not sound like much on the surface, but it adds up. And it's something that absolutely makes a difference. So that's the issue I'm trying to highlight. Thank you for the question again.
Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I think we would all agree that testing is necessary and gathering this data is important. PFAS is a big thing, and so we want to get wrap our heads around how big this problem is. But we need to make sure that we are providing the funding for these local government entities so that we're not putting them in a tough spot where they're having to cut back on other projects, local road project improvement projects, et cetera. So I recommend a yes vote for this amendment so we can make sure that the testing still occurs, but that we are making sure these local entities are made whole. Thank you.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, thank you. I think, we talk a lot around here about mandates, and this one in particular being unfunded is troublesome. And I want to thank Representative Wozlowick for bringing up the fact, or at least the notion that this is cooperative. And it is a fact that if a county is struggling with this and finding funding may be a part of that difficulty, they're going to be opening up permits. That's code, folks, for we're going to come in and you could be potentially looking at fines. You could be looking at losing your permit if you don't comply with what is well-intentioned but is causing a difficulty for these small facilities around the state. So that's unfortunately somewhat typical, more and more coming from MPCA. Would you volunteer to be a part of this? Is how some of the organizations, some of the facilities, I should say, are being propositioned. And then it's, well, maybe we wouldn't be. Well, actually, you have to be. It's very interesting how the facilities that have brought this to my attention are being approached by MPCA. On one hand, it's all very nice, and then as soon as a question comes up, it turns into a very forceful conversation, very aggressive. And a cooperative might be the absolute opposite of what we're talking about here. It's an unfunded mandate with teeth that can come after your permit, and this is something that should be addressed.
Seeing no further discussion to the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. The motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
IGO moves to amend Senate File number 4062, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A9.
I recognize the member from Itasca, the author of the amendment, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And today, it's with great pleasure that I bring an amendment to the floor that is going to bring transparency and accountability to the state's permitting process in regards to mining. I'm really excited to talk about this bill today and what it's going to mean for all of us in the state of Minnesota, but more importantly, those of us that live up on the Iron Range. So this bill is going to do three major points, and I'll talk about them briefly right now. The first bit being that for any EAWs, environmental assessment worksheets, those must be processed within 18 months under this bill. Second would be the environmental assessment standards, or the EIS, would take 3 years at a maximum. And then if any permitting projects go past those outlines, then they need to come right back to us here at the Minnesota Legislature and the project that is being permitted and report to why they're taking extra time. Members, this is a good government bill. So what we're going to be doing here is bringing that accountability and that transparency back to state agencies. And that's exactly what we need to do. And I'm going to tell you why. So as we're seeing around the world, and I've talked about this a lot in committee, so for those I share committee with, I apologize, you're going to get the same story again right now. But supply chains are shutting down, right? We're having a hard time getting the materials that we need to bring about the world of tomorrow. Whether that be copper, whether that be nickel, whether that be just permitting more for our taconite mines in northern Minnesota to produce the steel to help with the automobile shortage. We need more of these things, and we have companies that want to do it. So Minnesota, as we all know in this chamber, is home to the greatest environmental and labor standards. And I'll say that again, the greatest environmental and labor standards, not only in the country, but in the state. We are the benchmark. And in fact, I would say we go above the benchmark, which is something I'm really proud of, and all the Iron Rangers that I call and I live with back home are also proud of. So this bill today would give not only the people that I represent peace of mind, knowing that when a project comes to their community and says, we want to start, developing a copper nickel project here, we want to provide, 400 or 500 jobs, the equivalent of bringing a Super Bowl to northern Minnesota every year for the next 20 years. Members, let's talk about that. I mean, the economic impact would be huge. It gives those people living there, my friends and family peace of mind knowing that they're going to have a decision in either 18 months or 3 years whether that project's going to happen, or the steps that are needing to be taken so it can happen. I want to remind members the permitting process exists not to keep business from this state, but to help it be done the right way and the best way, and that is the way that I want it. That's the way everyone in northeastern Minnesota and the Iron Range wants it, and that's how we all want it here. So the fact of the matter is we can't deny this anymore. It's time that we start taking measures to get these things happening because we cannot wait any longer. Look up the London Metal Exchange. A few weeks ago, it crashed because the demand for nickel spiked so high that if they didn't shut the market down, the whole metals market in our world would have collapsed. That is the nickel required to build every electric car, every computer, every cell phone, every battery. We need it. We need the copper from everything to wire our homes to build a wind turbine and a solar panel. We need it. And the fact of the matter is we are lucky, we are blessed to have it right here in northern Minnesota. You know, the second largest deposit of copper, 90% of our nation's reserves exist right here in Minnesota. We have the rules on the books to make sure it's done right, and we have the people that know how to do it best. 140 years of mining has occurred in Minnesota without environmental destruction. I was just talking about the Canisteo project, an hour or so ago, and what's going on up there. That's some of the cleanest water in the state, members. Like I said, 50, 60-foot water clarity, the best. Maybe some of that mitigation process should be to bring the water down here to the metro. Maybe that would help a little bit down here with water clarity. But this is something good we can do today, and we can add to this environment bill. It holds our state agencies accountable, and it keeps we the people empowered to know what's going on in our government. Let's help unleash northern Minnesota. Let's bring good business partners here. Let's get these materials and critical minerals out of the ground, start manufacturing the world of tomorrow, and have Minnesota be the leader that does it. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would request a roll call.
Representative Igo requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, so there will be a roll call vote. Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just encourage everyone to vote green on this great amendment. Thank you.
Representative Herr, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of order. Advice?
State your point of order.
Under Rule 3.21A, motions and propositions must be germane. There is no reference to Chapter 93, which is mineral lands and mining, in this bill. Therefore, I ask that you find my point of order well taken.
Further advice to the Herr point of order. I find that the point of order is well taken.
Mr. Speaker?
Representative Igo.
I would like to appeal the ruling of the Speaker and request a roll call.
Representative Igo is appealing the ruling of the Speaker and requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we're talking about the Environment Bill today. The Environment Bill that handles all the jurisdiction of the DNR and how they permit. This is a good government bill. This is absolutely germane to the bill and something we need to be voting on today to add to the bill. I urge all of you to please vote no, red, to overturn this ruling, because my friends and family, the people of Minnesota's Iron Range, and those that benefit from a healthy permitting process need this support today. Two major projects, the Twin Metals project, been permitting for going on 8-9 years now. Polymet has been permitting for 17 years. That's right, members. In a year, it can vote. Maybe it can come down here and help itself. We need to get this stuff changed. We need to take steps right now. This is applicable to the bill. I request you to overturn the rule of the Speaker. Vote red. I look forward to your support.
Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Yes, I will remind the body that the question before us is, shall the decision of the Speaker stand as the judgment of the House? A yes or green vote supports the ruling of the Speaker, a no or red vote goes against the ruling of the Speaker. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll.
I'm ready.
Would the clerk please call the names of members who have not yet voted?
Davids.
David's aye.
David's aye. Franzen.
Did I do that wrong?
Branson, no.
Franzen, no. Hamilton.
Hamilton, no.
Hamilton, no. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye.
The clerk will close the roll.
David's changes from aye to no.
David's changes from aye to no.
Okay. There being 67 ayes and 63 nays, it is the judgment of the House that the decision of the Speaker shall stand. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Heinzman moves to amend Senate File Number 4062, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A12.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you. This amendment stops the MPCA from going further down the road that California has taken. It prohibits them from regulating emissions on things like lawnmowers, golf carts, motorcycles, snowmobiles, leaf blowers. Those are just a few items to name a few. It also repeals the California car standards that the Walz administration pushed through MPCA rulemaking in their process last year. Members, this is another opportunity to right a wrong. I heard a lot of folks talking about how important it is that we bring these standards to Minnesota in spite of the difference in our climate, in spite of the difference politically. We see California here being brought in this process, and this amendment would roll that back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
State your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, under Rule 3.21, I rise to a point of order that this amendment is not germane because it introduces a new subject, which is the regulation of vehicle emission standards, which is not in the underlying bill.
Further advice to the point of order. I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This was not a shock to see happening today, and not because it's out of order, but because that seems to be a pattern here. This amendment literally opens chapter 116.7 numerous times through the bill. Everyone here in the chamber knows that today. Yet here I am being rolled out of order, and this amendment being rolled out of order, when it clearly is, Mr. Speaker. I'll reference the lines so that you could look them up for yourself. If you page through the bill, Mr. Speaker, line 64.1, line 65.30, line 67.8, line 69.1, Mr. Speaker, all reference modifying chapter 116.07. So you would, I hope, follow the rules today and not consider that advice well taken.
I recognize the member from Isanti, the minority leader, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a little bit of advice for you again, and this has been consistent, where members rise to a point of order and they cite 321B. You absolutely can introduce a new subject. It just must be germane to the bill. And this is germane to the bill. You literally touch this very chapter and verse of statute 5 times in the bill. okay? So please don't stand up on the House floor and say, you can't introduce a new subject. You can say that when we're talking about an amendment to an amendment, but that has nothing to do with an amendment. And please, again, we did it yesterday, pull out 3.21. I know you don't want to vote on this, so you're going to rule it out of order. You can certainly do that, but don't do it thinking you've obeyed the rules and lived up to the integrity of this institution, because you will have not. So, Mr. Speaker, I will ask you to have the integrity that this place demands we have, and actually read the rule which says you can introduce a new subject. It must just be germane to the subject at hand, okay? That is not the case for an amendment to the amendment. Your strike zone is narrow. But for an amendment, you absolutely can. We do it all the time. We do it all the time in this chamber. You have done it this year. You've probably done it on this bill. And if I were paying attention closer to every amendment that you've offered on this bill, I would have recited them back to you today. But you know you've done it. You've done it on a dozen times this year. So let's not misuse the rules again today and pretend like, oh, we can't talk about this because we don't want to. Just be honest. Just stand up and say, you know what? Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I want to rule this one out of order because I don't want to talk about it. Just say that. If that's what you want to do, just say that. But Mr. Speaker, I want you to open the rules and read them, and I want you to honestly rule on this.
I have studied the amendment, I have reviewed the bill, and I have considered advice from Representative Long, Representative Heitzman, and Minority Leader Dowd, and I find that the point of order is well taken.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dowd.
I move to appeal the ruling of the Speaker, and I request a roll call vote.
Representative Dowd moves to appeal the ruling of the Speaker and requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's easier just to vote on these. It takes less time to just vote on these. It's difficult when you're in the minority, when the majority doesn't want to talk about stuff. But you know what? We have election certificates too. And we get to bring amendments to the floor, and sometimes it's the only place we get to talk about the issue that we want to talk about. And I'm sure you can imagine how frustrating it is when somebody says, oh no, we can't talk about this because it's introducing a new subject. Really? This is the Environment Omnibus bill, and you literally are amending this exact chapter and verse in state statute 5 times in this bill. But it's okay, it's okay. This one we don't want though. This one we don't want. You know what it is? It's not that it's not germane, it's that it's inconvenient. But you know what? Our rules don't have a section that says we get to rule stuff out of order because it's inconvenient. Do you know what's inconvenient? Having to listen to me talk to you about stuff like this all the time. Why don't you just vote on it? It'd be a lot easier. Just vote on it. Let our members have 3 or 4 conversations about it. We can sit down, take a quick vote, and we'll move on. But instead, we have to talk about your perverse interpretation of our House rules and trampling on the integrity of this institution time and time and time again. People expect better of us. I talked the other day about the importance of the job that we do here. And that back in 1905, somebody made a decision to build this place, to conduct this business, so that we could have debates that sometimes are uncomfortable. And so that a member from a particular district in this state could stand up and bring an amendment that was important to people in his district. And that you would show them the respect to listen to them. And you might engage in debate. And you know what? Once in a while, we might learn something from each other. But the heavy hand of a party telling us no, inconvenience, We can't listen to somebody that disagrees with us. We can't express our opinion or a vote on something that we may feel is inconvenient. How stupid does that sound? And I want you to think about the people that made a decision to build this Capitol. And I asked you yesterday to open your rules and look at this. Don't have to do whatever. I don't care. You've shown me you don't care so much about the rules. But actually look up. Look up at this beautiful room that you work in. Take in its majesty and its splendor. And ask yourself what the people who built this Capitol intended to happen in this room. Is this what they envisioned? Where we stifle debate and shut down somebody's opinion? We tell somebody that this issue is not important. People in my district don't care what's important in your district. No. We were all elected here and sent here to conduct the business of the state, to bring the voices of our constituents here and to listen to each other, and maybe once in a while learn from each other. Think about that. It's actually just easier to listen to each other. It's actually just easier to take a quick little vote that isn't going to hurt you a bit than to misuse and abuse the rules. But I'll tell you, it is frustrating. And I know that there's a couple of classes of members over there now that haven't been in the minority. But your turn is coming. You may not think it is. You may not feel like it's coming this time. And maybe it's not. I think it is. But it's coming eventually. Because if you serve in this chamber long enough, you're going to serve in both the majority and the minority. I've served twice now in each. It's obviously more fun to be in the majority. It's less fun to be in the minority. But every one of us got elected to be here. And every one of us acts as the voice for the people back in our districts. And just imagine for a second the slight of time after time after time. No, this is out of order. We're not going to give you the opportunity. I think we could conduct business here more respectfully to each other. Hopefully you've noticed I've tried to do that in recent months. I haven't always, but I've tried to do it a little more in recent months. I've been a little more helpful in getting things done around here, lending my voice and my experience to try to encourage people to get together and get some stuff done. And so you may remember the time that I stood here and you didn't like me. But I'm going to ask you to remember the times that I stood here with experience and knowledge and gave good advice. And I'm going to ask you to think about what it is you want to happen in this place, and how you want us to treat each other, and how you want us to be respectful of each other. And I get that once in a while there's an amendment offered that is a political thing or perceived as that. But not every one of them is. Sometimes it's literally just a member who has some constituents back in their district, and this is literally their only opportunity to have their voice heard. So let's give them that opportunity. Let's just hear each other out a little bit. Let's expand the strike zone a little bit on these rulings and points of order. You can do it. If you want to, you can rule them all out of order. You don't have to listen to us at all. But I don't think that's what our constituents want of us, and I don't think that's what any of us want of each other. So let's try to do a better job, okay? We've been doing a good job of not filibustering and not dragging things out, but at the same time, just like you do, and at the end of the day, you have more votes, so you're going to pass your bills. And there's not much we can do to stop that. but we do get the opportunity, just as you do, to talk about your ideas. We should have the opportunity to talk about our ideas as well. So I just want you to think about that a little bit. And while you probably won't overturn the ruling of the speaker, a red vote now would do that. I'd appreciate if you'd give him that vote. But in the future, let's just try to do a little better job.
Further discussion to the appeal. I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Doubt, for trying to work on this issue of figuring out where that strike zone is. And I'm going to be super brief, but I would ask if anybody would be interested, if I'm not supposed to bring this amendment to this bill, which bill do I bring it to? When would the Democrats here today allow me to have that opportunity to address this issue? So it would be helpful to know. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, first I will remind the body that the question before us is, shall the decision of the Speaker stand as the judgment of the House? A yes or a green vote supports the ruling of the Speaker. A no or red vote goes against the ruling of the Speaker. The clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. Would the clerk please call the names of members who have not yet voted?
Davids.
Davids votes no.
Davids, no. Franzen.
Franzen, no.
Franzen, no. Hamilton.
Hamilton, no.
Hamilton, no. Houseman.
Houseman, aye.
Houseman, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Schumacher. 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 Schumacher.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 68 ayes and 61 nays, it is the judgment of the House that the decision of the Speaker shall stand. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Stevenson moves to amend Senate File 4062, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A4.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this amendment is actually a bill authored by Chair Becker-Finn, and it modernizes Minnesota's definition of a muzzle loader to keep pace with technology developed right here in Minnesota by Federal Ammunition, and I'll say more about Federal in just a minute. Federal has developed a new muzzle loading propellant rifle system that allows safe, easy removal of unfired charge from the breech. It provides consistency. Plastic cartridges known as Fire Stick are loaded into factory ammunition specifications. It eliminates risk of overcharging. By increasing the safety of muzzle loading, the Fire Stick system is increasing the number of hunters who purchase a license for muzzle loading season for big game. This provision should be very familiar to this body. It was included in the House Environment Bill 2 years ago and was added into last year's Environment Bill by an amendment on the House floor. Unfortunately, just didn't make it across the finish line. I think that was Representative Nash's amendment. Now, I just want to take a minute to speak about the company that developed this system, Federal Ammunition. Many of you will know that Federal has a large manufacturing facility up in the northern suburbs. In fact, it's so large that as you travel west to east, it starts in Representative Heinrich's district and finishes up in mine. And what you might not know, though, is that yesterday, April 27th, was Federal Ammunition's 100th birthday. And that's obviously significant. Not a lot of companies make it 100 years. But what's really impressive is what Federal has done during those 100 years. To begin with, they've employed tens of thousands of Minnesotans in good-paying, family-supporting jobs. Today, Federal has 1,500 employees in the northern suburbs. In fact, when I was growing up in Coon Rapids, two of my very best friends, their father worked at Federal, and I know that they were a great employer then, and I know they're a great employer today. They're also a great member of our community, and I mean that on both a local scale, but also a much broader scale. They contributed to building Anoka City Hall, Anoka Municipal Park, and duck blinds along the Mississippi River. But their civic-minded nature extends much further than the borders of our state. Members will remember the famous incident early in the war in Ukraine when Ukrainian President Zelensky was offered the opportunity to evacuate, and he said, "I need ammunition, not a ride." Well, Federal answered his call and donated 1 million rounds of small caliber ammunition to Ukraine's armed forces. On top of all of that, they make a great product that millions of people around our state and in fact around the country rely upon and enjoy in various contexts every day. I've toured their facility along with Chair Becker-Finn, and maybe there were a couple other members on that tour, I can't remember. But I met many of the workers at Federal who take great and well-deserved pride in the work they do. So members, perhaps as a slightly belated birthday present, if only for that reason, I ask for your yes vote on this amendment.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash, unless you were rising for a point of order, Representative Dowd. Okay. Member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair, this is a good bill or amendment. I recommend people adopting this. I did put it on the bill as an amendment. We've had it as bills. The thing I like about Federal, in addition to all the things you talked about, is that they acquire, I think, all of the lead that they use in their ammunition from the recycling of batteries, which is a really great way to do that. That's also from a recycler, I believe, in Golden Valley. So really neat application. But I think of the many, many, many deer that I've taken, I think in the last 20 years, more of them have come from muzzle loading. And for me, it's a season, it's quieter. There are, the deer have calmed down. I get to be a little more selective in how I do my hunt. And I enjoy the stillness of the woods. I take selfies every now and then of me being snowed on because I like that part. But this is a very good provision. I'm sad that it was in both the House and the Senate bill, and somehow the chairs talked each other out of leaving it in the bill, which is still mysterious to me. But this is a good piece of policy. It is for a Minnesota company that developed it. It should be usable in the state of Minnesota because it is being used in other states, which also boggles my mind how the place that invented it can't use it for its own citizens. But I think that we should all put up red votes for this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the member from Isanti, the Minority Leader, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I know that I said if I was paying a little closer attention, I mean, if you just remember back to maybe 2 minutes ago when I was standing before you, and I said that, if I were paying closer attention, I could have pointed out an example where you brought an amendment that wasn't germane to the bill. This is it. According to your new standard, this amendment is less germane than the one that you just ruled out of order. Now you get to bring it to the bill, and by the way, I support it. I'm not calling a point of order. I will vote in favor of adding the amendment. Thank you for bringing it. It's an appropriate way to add something to an omnibus environment bill, something that might get missed by the committee. This time it happens to be one of your members that's bringing it. And so you're not going to rule it out of order, and we're not going to either. And it's going to go on the bill. But this amendment is less germane than the one that was just brought forward, that you ruled out of order. And the reason you didn't rule the Swedzinski one out of order was because you knew this one was coming. And while there was nothing to do with deer hunting or rifles or those sorts of things in the bill, you would have, look me in the eye right now, you would have ruled that one out of order all day long. But you didn't do it because you knew it would be too egregious if you turned that one down and then took your own, okay? I'm only calling it out because I want you to be aware that not just we can see what you're doing, but the people at home can also see what you're doing. Let's do a better job, okay? This is perfectly fine. This is germane. Because this is an omnibus bill, and yes, this bill does one time, not 5 times like the previous one, this bill just one time touches this chapter and verse of statute. But this is an appropriate way to bring an amendment that might have been missed by the committee or something that came up more urgently or something that a member just really cares about and should have the opportunity to voice and say, hey, I want to bring my issue here and have a vote on it. So you're doing it right now. Right now. Not only do you do it all the time, you're doing it right. The very next amendment after the one I was just talking about, you're doing it. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm not trying to rub your nose in it. It is, what you're doing right now is appropriate, but it's less appropriate than the one you just shot down. So think about that. And I want you to know that people are watching and people can see what you're doing. So please don't do it. Let's show people at home that we can actually very quickly just debate issues, take a vote, and move on, okay? So please support the amendment.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd encourage a yes vote on the amendment.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is a good amendment, and we should be able to support it. And I just wanted to actually speak to the technology, and not federal is great as far as the benefits that we heard from Chair Stevenson. And he is correct. We went on a tour together. I actually remember Representative Herr was with us as well. And as it turned out, there were a couple, I think there were 5 or 6 legislators, but Representative Herr and I were actually the only ones who actually owned guns and hunted with federal ammunition. And so this bill actually makes it clear that this new technology for muzzle loading is legal, and it will still be muzzle loading, but it makes the whole process of dealing with the ignition cartridge it's pretty cool technology. This actually will be safer for folks who hunt during the muzzle loading season if they choose to use this new technology. I know I'm excited to take advantage of it, and I know that others are too. And this has been, I think, Representative Nash has introduced a bill. I've introduced, we've been trying to do this for a couple of years. I guess this is the year that we get things done with Representative Stevenson. So who knew? So please vote green, members.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Heinrich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Happy 100th birthday to Federal Cartridge. Wanted to have the opportunity to say that. I want to thank Representative Stevenson for the amendment and for all the great realities that he was able to describe that Federal Cartridge brings to the Anoka and Coon Rapids area. And I want to thank Representative Becker-Finn as well for describing a little bit about the technology. This company makes the tolerance in their rounds is ranked amongst the best in the world. I believe the number I heard when I was on the tour there, and by the way, I want to encourage all members, if you have the opportunity to take a tour there, it's really fascinating and it's amazing the work that these people do. But I believe when I was there, I heard that they supply 80% of the police or sheriff's departments throughout the country. So don't quote me on that exactly. That's what I think I remember hearing that, and that was
really impressive to me. And they also, I think the Los Angeles SWAT team is, wants to make sure their tolerances are just perfect on those rounds, so they work perfect every time. So that's one of the clients as well of Federal Cartridge. So thank you again to both of the chairs for accurately describing and giving accolades to Federal. Thank you for the time, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Isanti, the Minority Leader, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just also wanted to point out this will be allowed statewide, and this is a rifle in deer season. So just so you know what you're voting for and what you voted against in this exact session, this is a rifle. It will be used during deer season, and it will be used statewide. By the way, the shotguns that we also use in the state now have rifled barrels. Those are also rifles. They have a bigger diameter bullet than a rifle defined by our regulations do. This one does not necessarily, but this is also a rifle that will be used during deer season. So just so everybody knows, if you want to be consistent in your votes, if you voted against the previous one, you'll probably want to vote against this one too. I will be supporting it because I agree with the author. It is safer, but just like the other one, this one is also something that will make our regulations, our deer seasons, and our deer hunting safer. So I appreciate you bringing it forward. But for those of you that voted against the previous one, you'll probably, just so you can be consistent, and just so you know, this is a rifle, will be used during the deer season, so you can be consistent in your vote. And I would roll call this one, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dowd requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Anything further, Representative Dowd? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just ask for a yes vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Will the clerk please call the names of members who have not yet voted?
Davids.
Davids votes aye.
Davids, aye. Franzen.
Franzen, aye.
Franzen, aye. Hamilton.
Hamilton, aye.
Hamilton, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, no.
Hausman, no. Liebling. Liebling. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Liebling. Liebling. Oh. Liebling, no.
The clerk will close the roll.
Oh, you got it. Thank you.
There being 127 ayes and 3 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended.
Senate File Number 4062, third reading as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Wozlowick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to highlight some of the things that are in this bill. I know Chair Hansen mentioned a lot of them in his opening remarks, but I want to point out a few other things. There's funding in this bill to help with the contamination at Pigs Eye landfill. Representative Jay Zhang has worked really hard on that issue. There's funding to do some testing for microplastics, little bits of plastic that we've found pretty much everywhere, including in our blood and our lungs and human bodies. The PFAS items that I mentioned earlier, I've heard time and time again that this is a bipartisan issue, that Republicans want to work on this issue and think that PFAS is bad and they want to do something about it, and we're offering the opportunity to do that in this bill with several bans on products as well as disclosure requirement. I also want to just mention the multifamily composting project, which is going to be really helpful for those families living in multifamily communities, that they're able to take part in composting as well as those who live in single-family homes, and that's Representative Agbaje who's worked on that. There's also a significant amount of funding for scientific and natural area maintenance. These are the crown jewels of the state, and we need funding to make sure that they are kept in good order, and so there's funding in there for this as well. Chair Hansen mentioned the Lawns to Legumes program, which has been very popular. I think they almost always get more requests than they have funding for, and that's Representative Morrison, who's been a champion for that program. Also, turtle protections. I don't know about you all, but I personally really like turtles, and I'm glad to see some turtle protections in here from Representative Vang. And then a couple things, the No Child Left Behind, No Child Left Inside piece that's been a really popular program as well. Representative Becker-Finn, that's been she's championed that program for the last several years. And then Carpet Stewardship Program, Representative Jordan. So this bill has been a work of many different members. There's a lot of different provisions in here impacting a lot of different programs and tackling a lot of different environmental issues, and I would urge members to vote green.
I recognize the member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. There's several reasons why not to support the bill. From a district out in western Minnesota, the district I represent is a lot of ag. And this bill grows government. It grows DNR, MPCA, and unfortunately, during the time that agriculture is having such challenges, we do not need these reckless, irresponsible additional regulations on the folks who give us food and raw goods that help make a lot of things that we use every single day. Another thing that this bill does that's really alarming is with existing drainage law. Before I came here in 2015, I knew nothing about drainage law. Over the last several years, I haven't got a PhD, but I learned a lot of things about drainage law. And one of the things I'm going to share with the members is how maintenance of drainage ditch, which is extremely important for agriculture and other things in our state, there has to be maintenance on it. It's just like maintenance on your roads or on your home. If we don't maintain our ditches, then what happens is we get dirty water, we get water that just sits there, and that's not good. We want to protect our environment. But right now, the landowners next to the ditch, who benefit from the ditch, who invests in that ditch with taxes, are the ones that make that decision, and local government. If it's a township, depending on who has authority over that ditch, maybe it's a county unit of government, maybe it's a watershed district, but those folk have that control. What this bill does is it moves that control to other people downstream who has no monetary investment, decision in this, and so forth. The counties, the Association of the Counties don't like that. This is a huge change in existing law that my folks in my district does not support, and a lot across the district, across the state. Let me use this example. I'll use this as an example. All of us, pretty sure, owns a car. So we should be changing oil on that car and doing maintenance. So if we want to go and change the oil on the car, that means we purchased it, we buy the supplies, we make sure we get the right product in there. We're not putting vegetable oil in the engine. We're putting regular engine oil, maybe 10W30 if you have a newer vehicle, a 5W30. But before we do that, we have to go down the DMV and get a permit. We own the car, we maintain the car, we wash the car, we pay for all the services for the car, but we got to get a permit to get oil changed on that. That is exactly what this bill does for drainage, maintaining of drainage. So that's one of the reasons to vote against this bill. I talked earlier about growing government. This grows government. In the time where people in agriculture and feedlots owners and dairy and stuff, we don't need that. Along with that, with small towns, one of the things I would love to see, because we are, in this bill is $240 million in this bill. We really need to look at better ways of using that money for like helping small communities with their sewer projects. I represent currently 42 small communities who need help with their infrastructure with sewage, wastewater. The community I live in, which is on that hump bump tip elbow nose, Browns Valley, our water treatment facility was built in the 80s. That would be such a better use of this money. So for those reasons and other reasons that you'll hear from members on my side, I will not be supporting this bill. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I just really want to thank Chair Hansen for including the voter education provision. I was actually just having a conversation with Representative Becker-Finn, and I have all these little Post-it notes all over my desk, and it says 16,000 new voters in the last 2 years. I know that was a figure that shocked Representative Becker-Finn the same way it did Representative Heinzman when we were in committee. And we have 16,000 new voters, but we don't have any more lakes than we did 2 years ago. And so our lakes are getting a little crowded, so we need to make sure that that we have safety, that we know what we're doing when we're out there. Half of the victims who died in boat-related accidents in 2001 were under the age of 40. And so when we have more boats, no more space, we should make sure that we know what we're doing out there. And so, you know, this voter education will go a long way for making sure that we keep invasive species out of our lakes and that we are respecting each other on the water. And so, I know I kind of talked a little bit about this before, but you know, on the back of your driver's license, you get that little endorsement. And the one thing I will remember from my snowmobile safety course is always let the snowmobiles come. Let them, the ones coming at you know how many people are behind you. And so now I'm always going to have to be the second to the last sled because I only have this one finger left. So I just want those courses work. So I hope everybody can support that voter education provision. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, I was surprised when looking up this bill and seeing the details that there's money in this bill for amazing tree planting. And this is where it should be. Tree planting here in the Environment Bill. We have $11 million for emerald ash replacement, tree replacement, and then $8 million to Bowser for conservation tree planting. This bill spends $240 million additional dollars in an off-budget year, and yet our poor little old drought disaster bill was hijacked, and $13 million got added to that bill for tree planting and other water conservation issues. And by the way, that bill is still languishing in committee because of tree planting, money for trees for the DNR, while our farmers are waiting for the disaster aid. You know, it was Dairy Day down here, I think yesterday it was, and I had a couple of dairy folks ask me the progress of the drought aid bill, and said, well, it's still hung up in conference committee. And they asked why, and had to tell them that it's because of the impasse with the Senate over tree planting. The other issues are pretty well ironed out, or could be ironed out within literally hours, but it's the money for the DNR tree planting that is holding it up, getting money out to farmers to help cover their additional costs. And I was talking before session today with Representative Lewick, and by the way, Mr. Speaker, would he yield for a question, Representative Lewick? I think we're tied up, but anyway. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Lueck yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I live down in the flat country with flat land and good soil, but Representative Lueck is up in tree country, and he was talking about how you have to take some time before you can evaluate a stand of trees after a drought. So Representative Lueck, how do you go about doing that up in your county, Aiken County, when you have to diagnose and determine how many trees were lost because of drought damage?
I recognize the member from Aiken, Representative Lueck.
Thank you, Representative Anderson, for the question. One, you got to be a little bit cautious, and two, you got to look real hard. It's kind of unique, and we see this quite frequently from a variety of things. One, obviously, drought, and particularly on things like spruce and pine, red pine, white pine, some of the other evergreens. They'll literally turn brown. Little seedlings will turn brown. And, but you gotta wait till the frost goes out and see what Mother Nature does with rain. And believe it or not, lots of those little seedlings are gonna turn green again. Now, we're not talking about oak, popple, maple, where the leaves come and go. We're talking about the needles. Now, Aiken County, up there, our land department, we manage almost 250,000 acres of timberland. And depending on the type of timber that's harvested, we plant trees annually up there. But it's too early yet to absolutely determine whether or not you're going to have to replace those seedlings. And I guess the other thing, and I don't know about this, Representative Anderson, maybe someone else could answer this question. We're talking about possibly drought damage to big shade trees in the cities. I wonder how many of them shade trees have already been removed so you could actually plant trees next month or in May, or do we have a problem here with a horse before the cart and we haven't removed those big shade trees on those boulevards that apparently it's an emergency now that we plant trees there? I would hope that we are very careful about that, because if you put a little seedling down underneath a big old shade tree, it may not be completely dead, and it'll take that water away from that little seedling. So, yeah, I just look at this whole thing and go, you know what? Those folks that have got to meet their payroll, got to pay their bills, had to sell their animals, that happened already. That's continuing to happen. Well, guess what? At least up in what I call big tree country, we're still evaluating, and guess what? There's another thing you have to do before you plant seedlings. You got to grow them. And just about all of the seedlings that are going to be planted this spring, guess what? They've been grown. So there's a little supply and demand problem here. There is no supply and demand problem with the issue within our livestock and our crop part of agriculture, though. Those people have been beat right into the dirt. And there's no excuse, none whatsoever, that the Department of Agriculture right now ought to be issuing those emergency funds to people that suffered that loss, because the loss has already occurred and they can look right out in their pasture and see it. The cows are gone. Thank you for the question.
Representative Anderson.
Thanks again, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Lueck. Yes, it's a cold, wet spring. The pastures are not growing yet, and yet we are hung up in the drought aid bill because of tree plantings for the DNR. And where it should have come from is this bill, where there's money already allocated here among their $240,000 supplemental request. There are a total of $19 million in this bill for tree plantings of some variety or not. So again, just the frustration from those in agriculture that they are being held up and getting their aid because of tree plantings. And, you know, the DNR said we have to get this money right away, and they kept on about that in our first meeting. But really, in some places, the frost is not out of the ground yet, and as Representative Lewick mentioned, it takes some patience to determine exactly how much the loss is. There was talk of up to 70% loss in some of the trees, but not for sure yet, not for certain if that is the exact amount of tree losses. But again, just the plea to let's get the compromise done, get that disaster bill completed for the farmers, and get on with our business. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Rice, Representative Lippert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Chair Hansen for an excellent environment bill and thank the committee and staff for their diligent work too. I want to take a moment to share with the body that we heard testimony in the Environment Committee from the DNR that we have lost millions of seedlings. And I would submit that we should be doing multiple things. We need to be responding to drought in an emergency way, but we also need to be proactive. And planting trees is green infrastructure. It's proactive. To address climate change, we need to be doing multiple things at once and quickly. We need to transition to clean energy, electrified transportation, reduce carbon emissions in our buildings, and also work with nature to naturally sequester carbon. And this bill is doing that in a big way. In our tree planting provisions in this bill, we want to plant a tree for every Minnesotan in each of the next 4 years, 5.7 million trees a year. And the Nature Conservancy estimates that this would sequester 1 million tons of CO2. The funds would help communities replant trees lost to emerald ash borer, help landowners accelerate conservation plantings across the state. And Representative Keeler did a great job to ensure that more trees can be planted on school grounds too, teaching young people about the work we need to do together and the climate solutions that are available to us. This bill also increases funding through the Board of Water and Soil Resources to help farmers implement soil health practices that protect soil from erosion, improve water quality, reduce the need for expensive fertilizer, and also some of these practices naturally sequester significant amounts of carbon. There's also policy in this bill stressing that we protect, restore, and enhance our peatlands to go with funding that we passed for peatlands as a part of the legacy bill. We're just beginning to understand how important peatlands are in our work to mitigate climate change. Wetlands naturally sequester large amounts of carbon for their size, and peatlands are wetlands that naturally sequester much, much more carbon than the average wetland. And when these peatlands are drained for agricultural use, they also release tremendous amounts of carbon. And I heard from a local DNR official, they're concerned that if these peatlands dry out and start on fire, they burn for a long, long time. Now we have so much peatland in Minnesota. We have more than any other state but Alaska. And we know that the dry peatlands or cultivated peatlands are emitting so much carbon that the MPCA estimates that 11 million tons of CO2 are being emitted by peatlands in Minnesota, which is only less than light-duty trucks and the burning of coal and natural gas. So planting trees, funding soil health, and protecting and restoring and enhancing peatlands are provisions in this bill that will help us partner with nature in our work against climate change. There are many more important provisions in this bill too that help us care for the environment and restore our connection to it now and in the future. I'm excited about this bill, and I encourage members to support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Itasca, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief. I just want to take a few minutes to kind of talk about this bill. I think the best way to talk about it, I think this bill is kind of a huge missed opportunity. You know, this bill, I think, spending somewhere around the tune of $260 million. And a lot of the money is just kind of getting spread about to public policies and programs that may or may not work. We don't really know. But what I do know is that we could have taken some steps for some policy that could have started making a difference a little bit more on a larger, kind of big, a global scale, right? I think something here, we got to think about a little bit more in this chamber, and I think we had a kind of a wake-up call when we took the time to divest from Russia and Belarus. This chamber started thinking globally. I like that, because it gave me hope that we could start thinking globally on the issues that affect my home on the Iron Range. Chair Hansen, I tried once again to get some mining bills heard, or maybe some timber-type bills heard again. We didn't have those conversations. I'm hoping one day we can have those conversations. Maybe if it's not in committee, maybe it's you and I can go out to lunch sometime. I would appreciate that a lot. But this bill doesn't have any of that. And I think in this time, I said it, supply chains are closing down. We have hostile nations that are against us. We're starting to become aware to the world around us, the human rights violations, the environmental destruction. And everyone in this room and the people of Minnesota want to lead, right? We want to have carbon neutral products. We want to be aware of what we're leaving for the next generation. I think that's really important, but this bill doesn't really take any major steps to do that. It's some money here to plant trees. It's some money here to have a stewardship program. It's nothing actually big change. One of the amendments that I brought forth today was to do that, was to start streamlining some of this permitting and making it more transparent. Not only just so the people that support and huge advocates for the mining industry can get involved, but so those who don't know about it or want to learn about it can see it a lot better. And I think if you talk to anyone who lives where I live or my neighbors, we all want everyone to be involved in this. We're a very, very proud people on the Iron Range, right? And I guess I was very, disappointed we couldn't add that today. I'm hoping we can continue to advocate. This summer, I encourage any members, get a hold of me. I would love to take you on some tours, not only just with some of the mines that are in existence, but I could take you some places too on some public lands and show you what past mining looks like and really give you that in-depth experience. And I seriously welcome any of you. The next point I wanted to talk about is, the Can of Steel project. I'm happy we were able to add that language to the bill today. It is a drop in the bucket to getting us where we need to be. I thank you to Representative Sandstead for working on this for 6 years. But the reason that I brought this here today is because we need some assurances. We don't know if a bonding bill is going to happen. And I think everyone in this room knows that bonding can and cannot happen and bills get pulled out at the last second. Well, unfortunately, the people of Coleraine and Bovey don't have much longer to wait. And if we can spend, around $260 million on tons of government projects and grow government, I don't know how we couldn't prioritize $8 million to make sure my families and constituents don't get flooded and their city destroyed. And, I'll say it again, the home of the picture of Grace is be destroyed. These are the important things that matter, members. And we didn't have the conversation once again. This is the policy year. We should have had a lot more vibrant discussion about things that are going to make a lasting impact and make lives better for Minnesotans. A term that I'm trying to encourage all of us to use more is when we think about policy. Let's stop thinking about how we can hand out money and start thinking about how we can hand up people and communities. Let's make a lasting difference. And unfortunately, the spending in this bill today is going to be short-time money. It's going to grow government, ask for more dollars in the future. My community was left behind, but I encourage, Representative Sandstead, you said you're going to be working on the bonding. I hope to be working with you. I hope we can get that done together, but we should have taken the steps today to make sure it was in 2 places so that my families in Itasca County are taken care of. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll be voting no today. I would encourage other members to do so because this bill, once again, was a missed opportunity for all of us here in Minnesota, and I hope we can do better next time. Thank you.
Members, please take your conversations off the House floor. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I rise today in support of the Environment Bill. And really, it comes from a place of supporting the environment all of my life. This is something that not only I value, but frankly, my constituents value. And Minnesotans value it. And so as I think about this bill and the reason we're passing this bill, it's for Minnesotans. And I've heard lots in the conversation today about flooding, about drought. And we need to address the reason we're having more floods and having more droughts, and it's climate change. And so this bill addresses climate change. It looks at the things we can be doing to ensure that we have the environment for the future, so that the Minnesota that we have today and the traditions and the pieces of Minnesota that we value around the environment, our state bird, the loon, our state tree, the red pine, and our state fish, the walleye, if we continue on the path that we're going, our climate is going to change so dramatically that those organisms will not be able to survive in our state. And so if we want to become Kansas, then we can keep going on the path we're going. I don't think that's what we want to do. I want to be the Minnesota that is a home where loons thrive, where red pine thrive. And so if that's programs or provisions in the bill that are planting trees, that's because that helps our climate. That helps our climate, and it also helps with water quality. There's provisions in the bill today that are addressing water quality around soil health. And so if we're addressing water quality, that's also helping our environment. It's helping protect our state so that we can continue to have walleye in our lakes, so we can continue to have loons. So members, I encourage you to vote green on this bill, because this is a bill that's looking toward the future, it's looking toward improving our climate, and it's looking toward improving our water quality. So people, vote green.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair Hansen, for allowing for us to work with you on this bill. And I just want to stand in support of this bill because of some of the strong environmental protections that we have in here for Minnesotans who are, disproportionately impacted by pollutions and air toxics, especially our communities of color, people living in poverty, and people who are uninsured or people with disability. I think it is important for us to recognize, and I have sent out 2 documents to the body about the disproportionate impact of pollution and air toxics. We understand for the Department of Health that, air pollution impacts all Minnesotans, but, disproportionately more to our communities of color and low-income communities. And so what we have in the bill, some of the provisions that we have in there are to have the MPCA consider some of the impacts to these communities when there are industries that are coming into the state of Minnesota, whether they are here to, start business and are attaining air permits or solid waste permits, for them to consider just the pollution that's currently here in our communities before they renew, amend, or give out the permit. And I think that's the least that we could do in the state of Minnesota to protect these Minnesotans who are, facing an undue burden from these toxics and contaminants. And, as we think about costs, I just want to, give you all some figures. These are from the Department of Health. Granted, they are a little bit older now. So just the cost for all of you to think about, the cost of asthma and some of our cardiovascular related hospital visits. According to the Minnesota Department of Health, in 2013, Minnesotans incurred almost $2 billion in charges for inpatient hospitalization. So just think about that. That's $2 billion to our residents. And then related to asthma, in 2012, Minnesotans spent an estimated $6.7 billion on health care for asthma. And the cost for a lost day of works to be in the hospital is about an additional $54.3 million. And so these are just some of the economic figures for all of you when we think about the cost that's associated with air pollution and air toxins to our communities. And so just really want to say thank you to all members, in the Environment Committee when we were able to have these conversations on how do we, make sure that we are protecting some of our most vulnerable Minnesotans. And Mr. Chair and Mr. Speaker, I really appreciate some of the work that has been done this session to prioritize communities who are, overburdened by air pollution and air toxics. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Koochiching, Representative Eklund.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Couple things I want to address. And when I talked about emerald ash borer and the ash trees, Minnesota's got about approximately 1 million acres of ash forests in mainly northern Minnesota. And I got this number from Kirk Peterson, so I haven't had a chance to verify it, but he told me that each individual ash tree absorbs approximately 2,000 gallons of water a year. Well, for those of you that have never been in an ash swamp or an ash swale, come on up, I'll take you to one. Bring your hip waders. So if we lose those trees and we lose that processing of that water, the other things that we've been talking about here are going to be greatly there'll be a lot more. I can't remember the word. Anyway, we'll have flooding issues if we lose our ash swamps, because they're the filter. They're what take care of, handle our excess water when it's wet. So I'll leave that for a second, and now I'll go to chronic wasting disease. And I'm not going to talk about all the chronic wasting disease stuff that I did earlier, but I'm going to talk to you an issue that's going on with our counties. And in your inboxes is a 20-page report from St. Louis County. St. Louis County knows how important deer hunting is to their county and to their county economy. So what they're doing is looking at taking care of their own, making their own rules, making their own laws, not laws, because counties can't make laws, but making their own rules to take care of chronic wasting disease. So if we have that happen, are we going to end up with an 87-county hopscotch assortment of rules and regulations to handle this? Or should we handle it at the state the way it should be, so we can have one policy that works for the entire state? Representative Hansen, thank you for including this CWD article in the bill. I think it's very important that the state of Minnesota knows that this environment bill is doing what it can to control and counter CWD in the state of Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. I'd like to remind you that no amount of exposure to lead is safe. I'll also remind you that one of the most common ways your constituents and my constituents are exposed to lead is through lead service lines And one thing, you might not know what a lead service line is. That's okay. A lead service line is the pipe that connects your home or where you live. It could also be a mobile home. It could be a nursing home. It could be an apartment complex to the water main. And a lot of times those water mains, especially if your home was constructed before 1987, has implements that contain lead. And this is how constituents are exposed to lead. And this bill, like the legacy bill and like others that we're authoring, appropriates money to identify and replace those lines, which will make the water that your constituents drink safer for them. And lead is also harmful to animals. And this bill recognizes that. We allocate money to the MPCA to collect lead tackle. So if a bird, like a swan or a loon or a diver duck, swallows a lead sinker, for example, they die. And birds do swallow them because they swallow small rocks to help them, about the size of lead sinkers, to help them digest their food. A group of Girl Scouts, this is actually one of my favorite days in committee, and I love hearing from girls interested in science and nature, talked to their representative, Representative Peter Fisher, about the swans in Vadnais Lake, or Sucker Lake in Vadnais Heights, and how they were concerned about that. And they pushed for him to author this bill to get the lead out, and he did that, and that's included in this bill. Representative Hansen is concerned about swans. I think we all are. I know when I am driving to go visit a friend who lives in Monticello, I love looking at the swans that spend all winter there. I know one of my favorite things to do is actually bird watch and look for and identify birds. It's been something that connects my family. And so knowing that we're taking action to protect human health and our birds that are our iconic species are what this bill is all about, because no amount of lead exposure is safe for birds or humans. I have included a packet that you should have all been emailed with a letter from community groups across the state that are concerned about lead. And they're concerned about humans and they're concerned about birds. And so you can pick up one of those, you can read this letter, and you can talk to your constituents about what matters to them. I really enjoy serving on this committee. It's one of those committees that we talk about things that make us happy, we talk about fishing. Representative Becker-Finn has a great bill about a report that looks at junk fish, which is something we shouldn't say. There's no such thing as a junk fish. We have non-game fish, and we should study them and think about their importance in our habitat, and this bill does that. This bill also really does look at human health as well. Representative Wazelik has been a true leader and a true visionary on PFAS. And PFAS is bad. We can do something about it. This bill does that. Your constituents don't want to be exposed to PFAS. So you should vote for this bill to protect your constituents from all of these toxins like PFAS, like lead, like cadmium. This is a bill that protects the environment, which is one of the reasons why I think so many of us love Minnesota. You know, I grew up in Illinois, and I moved to Minnesota for educational opportunities, but also because I love to play outside. And I know many of your constituents do as well. So please vote for their health and their environment, and please vote for this bill.
I recognize the member from Isanti, the Minority Leader, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I actually wasn't going to speak on this bill today. I haven't been speaking on these omnibus bills as the close. Sometimes the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader give the closing speeches or right before the authors. But I was in the restroom back here just now and listened to Representative Akam's comments about the environment and how this bill makes the environment better and will make it cleaner and save our world. And I came running out to the floor thinking, what is happening? And she sat down, and I walked over behind, and I see you're looking at your laptop and looking at your iPhone over there. The problem is, folks, putting your head in the sand is hurting our environment. People on this side of the aisle want a clean environment as well. But our ideas actually will work to make it clean. I haven't told this story on the House floor for a while, but I was out of this country, I don't know how many years ago, when they were just about to sign the Paris Climate Accords, and I was in a country that the only...
Members, please take your conversations off the House floor into the alcoves or tiring room or rotunda. Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I happen to be in a country where the only English-speaking channel was BBC America, I think it was called, and everything else was in another language. So I was watching that, and if you've ever seen that channel on your hotel TV, it just repeats itself every 15 or 20 minutes. It's kind of the same news stories running. And because this Paris Climate Accords were coming up, they were running this story about what was happening, and they visited in India folks that were burning coal on the side of the street to heat their food, and how that the goal of the Paris Climate Accords was for developed countries like ours to reduce our emissions so that countries like India and China could increase their emissions. And ultimately, we know what happened. We know that agreement was signed. But do you know what that agreement did? And is it carbon emissions? Is that what the bad thing is? Do you know that that agreement allows China to increase their carbon emissions for 15 years before they have to start reducing them? But we were required to start reducing right now? 15 years. Do you want to know what I've never seen? I've never seen a comparison of the emissions of China versus the emissions of the United States. I would love to see that, because we know who the violators are. We know who the emitters are. We know where the pollutants are coming from. And if you're worried about the global climate, you continue to crack down and make sure that we couldn't mine any of these precious metals here that we use for our iPhones. We can't mine those in Minnesota, where we have the strictest environmental standards in the world. And do you know what, Representative Akam, when you bought that iPhone, you're forcing that mining to go to China, where they have the least environmental standards in the world. You are making the problem worse, and your bill does nothing to make it better. And don't for 1 second put your head in the sand and pretend like you're doing the world a favor. Go to China. The sky in China looks like the brown on these walls everywhere. You can't breathe there. Everybody wears a mask, even pre-COVID. When they had the Olympics there, they had to shut the industry down for months ahead of time so that the sky would clear. And you think we're the problem? You want to shut down our industry here and kill our jobs in our districts? And then you want to prevent an amendment from coming to the floor so that we could even have that conversation? And you think you're cleaning the world up? How many years will it be before the net emissions on the planet will be lower because of the Paris Climate Accords? 15 years China can increase. What will it take them just to get back to zero? 30 years? Longer? They're still putting coal-fired power plants online in China. I wish I had the data in front of me. I didn't plan to stand up and speak here, but every one of you knows it's true. And if you really want to make the world a better place, stop buying iPhones and laptops, because those metals that you won't allow us to mine here in Minnesota, you're driving that to the least environmental friendly mining in the world. And it's not just in China, it's in South America. And you want to feel good about yourself like you're doing yourselves a favor. You know what? We want to help you. We want to join in, because we want a clean environment too. But we're not going to pretend like we don't know what's going on. So let's prevent any jobs and any, we got the best technology and the best environmental standards in the world right here in Minnesota. You'd think this is where we'd want to do all those things. You'd think this is where we'd want to mine. Nope, stop it. Stop the pipeline. Stop anything. Stop anything that doesn't make us feel good. You know where they make these solar panels? Oh my God, I could just go, I'm gonna sit down now, because I think we all know what's going on in the world. But I just want you to know that there are people in this chamber who aren't gonna pretend like we don't know what's going on in the world. So you feel good about yourselves. I'm not voting for your bill.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heintzman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish I could say that over the course of the last few months that there was some kind of collaborative effort in putting this bill together. And I'm not trying to be ultra negative here. I'm trying to just simply point out that here we are going through an exercise in what ultimately will likely prove to be futile in introducing huge new spending in this subject area, $240 million from the general fund. I'm a spreadsheets guy, so I'm going through the spreadsheet and I'm seeing many of these things and I'm going, if there was unlimited resources and money grew on trees, that might make sense. But less than a year ago, we passed a budget for MPCA, Bowser, DNR. We can go on down the list of agencies, and here we are back in a supplemental bill spending $240 million out of the general fund. And I'm just going to go through a few of these things so that we have this in mind just before we're about to vote. $5.6 million for an operating adjustment for MPCA. I mean, maybe we missed that last year, Representative Hansen, but they're fully funded. That's the truth. I don't think we missed anything. If we did, maybe there could have been a discussion about that. I didn't hear anything on the floor today. $10 million for new waste prevention and recycling grants. $5 million to do composting in multifamily buildings. Last I checked, we already had many recycling programs at the local and county level. Why not build on those existing programs? Why are we creating an entirely new recycling program? I mean, maybe there's an explanation. $11 million for cities to plant trees. We already talked about that for a few minutes. I could go on about it myself. I think we can move on to the next spending line item. $1.7 million to grow government by creating a new outdoor recreation office. That's not just $1.7 million today. That's ongoing costs, members. And here again, this is taxpayer dollars. And for those watching at home, for every $1 million project that I'm citing, that's $1 million less in tax relief. Those of you that were overtaxed in Minnesota, buckle up. Democrats don't want you to get your money back. They want to spend it. We already have DNR and Explore Minnesota tourism. Why not build on existing rather than recreating the wheel with a new government agency, outdoor recreation office? $5 million, Representative Hansen, for Lonsdale legumes. I know you love this thing, but communities around the state are rejecting it, mine in particular. The city of Baxter just recently voted to disallow Lonsdale legumes because you know what? It's not that great to look at. Sometimes neighbors aren't super excited about it. Maybe, Representative Hansen, you know folks that are out in their yard cultivating their Lonsdale legumes or whatever they do, and it's gorgeous. But in many cases, it just looks like an ill-kept lawn. I'm not trying to be obnoxious, but cities don't like it. They're rejecting it. This one I'm still trying to wrap my head around. I understand swan resting areas. Everybody needs a rest, even the swans. But how does it cost $1.4 million? I mean, I'm imagining pillows or something where they come down and they have a little spot that's, I don't know. I question that, Representative Hansen. It's a lot of money for a swan resting area. I think they've been resting for quite some time without that, but maybe we need to establish something. We already have it, but I'm sure it can be explained. Somebody might understand it. I don't. There's a lot of new policy in this bill that will make Minnesota an outlier in comparison to neighboring states. And I'll just name a few things that are super frustrating. We talked a lot about some of the PFAS language. And if folks read the bill, which I did from cover to cover, and I actually did a little Googling so that I could see for sure, because the rumor is that we were just taking California language and mimicking it in our bill. Representative Hansen, maybe that makes sense here again, but you know, a lot of the stuff coming out of California isn't that popular. The California Cars emission standards that Governor Walz brought to the state through MPCA rulemaking, not that popular, especially in my part of the state. And sure enough, here we go. We got rules that are already established in California. We're mimicking in this bill, trying to bring that to Minnesota, regulating PFAS, which we know we have an emerging issue. We know we can work on this, and I think we should be working on it together. But in this language, not only is it outlawing the use of some of these things, but it goes even further. Rather than including the intentionally added clause for manufacturers and people in business around the state, which I'm a small business guy, I'm trying to follow the rules. It's hard sometimes. Rather than trying to make sure that people's intentions are considered before coming up with fines up to $10,000, we eliminate that. So we take all of the rules and eliminate any opportunity to help Minnesotans who might inadvertently break the law and not even know it. That's the kind of regulation that's in this bill. This creates a patchwork of regulation around the country when states decide we're going to just arbitrarily go after fill in the blank product or manufacturer. We have to work on the science to figure this problem out before we start passing all kinds of regulatory expectations and giving MPCA broad new rules to enforce that. Come on, folks. This is a no-brainer to help work with industry. Finally, there are things in this bill that we left on the cutting room floor last year, like, and Representative Eklund's not here, but the farm survey and turtle taking provisions. For example, there was dozens of others that failed in last year's bill. Guess what? We're recycling, all right. We're recycling them in this bill. They failed last year. What's going to be different this time around? This is, as Representative Igo just said a few minutes ago, a missed opportunity. We could be working together to produce, I think, a better product, Representative Hansen. I don't know, maybe one or two bills that Republicans offered were even heard in the Environment Committee. Maybe I miscount, and you could correct me, Representative Hansen, if I'm wrong, but I really hope that we can do better. And in Conference Committee, maybe we'll have that chance. So members, I'm going to be voting red on this. I hope that this bill will come back and take advantage of the opportunity in Conference Committee to improve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Dakota, the author of the bill, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, I'm sad that I think that you're going to vote against the bill. Some of the members on the other side of the aisle. Makes me sad. Because this bill is a great opportunity. And it's a great opportunity because we moved past the stalemate of the last 10 years. Now, there's been a lot of discussion over the last couple months about redistricting. Just think about, we've all been representing these districts. The districts haven't changed for 10 years. And if you think about it, a lot of the debate hasn't changed in 10 years. The same things get discussed year after year. And with that discussion, nothing happens. Nothing happens because people retreat into their corners and don't look at the new opportunities. Meanwhile, the carbon dioxide limits go up, the climate gets worse, and we have to look at how we're going to be dealing with the consequences of that, whether it's drought or flooding or trees going down. I'm actually kind of shocked at the opposition to tree planting today. That's a new one for me. So what the bill does, the actual bill, breaks that mold, breaks that stalemate. But it doesn't forget the past. The past when there were promises made to repay funds that were never kept for almost 20 years. Almost 20 years. And newsflash, landfills leak. So many of us in here had constituents who paid fees into that fund that was taken. Very few of us were here. Some of us weren't even here when that was taken. This pays it back. In addition, it goes back to that original intent of lottery in lieu of, to right that wrong. I would think that that would be something that we could agree on. Additional legacy. We talk about legacy with a large L, but a small L, the legacy of the Pig's Eye dump. And I would invite you, now that it's spring, to come down to the Mississippi River in Representative Zhang's district and look at that dump, where sewage was burned and dumped on top of an open dump right next to the Mississippi River. Now, because of climate change, Battle Creek goes through that. The volume of the creek and the velocity of the creek have increased. And that stuff is getting brought out into Pig's Eye Lake, which then comes into the Mississippi River. Just because we cannot see the contaminants doesn't mean they're not there. Whether they're PFAS or any list of chemicals that we can't pronounce, they're still there. Prevention is better than cleanup, but we have cleanup work to do, and ignoring the problem for 10 years or almost 20 years doesn't do any good. Let's right those past wrongs. And let's look at what we know of today, what we can do. What can we do, each of us as a Minnesotan? We can plant trees. We can provide for voluntary conservation that we know that our soil and water conservation districts can implement in all of our districts. We know that we've been better at implementing, getting the federal money in the ground for wildlife habitat, water quality, pollinators, climate change. I would hope we could agree on that. We moved through about 4 bills each committee. And I thought we had, I guess I was in a different room or a different Zoom, I thought we had a good discussion. Because there's things that we should be able to agree on. Righting those past wrongs, investing in conservation, dealing with the contaminants. Now, even here today, and I'm sad at the opposition, but even here today, I thought we had a reasonable debate. But I should note, Representative Eklund, we spent more time talking about ammo and weapons than we did about the deer that have been getting infected with a prion disease that we've been talking about for 5 years, that there is complete opposition to doing anything that deals with management or changing behavior. 5 years. The first vote in this body on a moratorium was in 2017. The other body finally took a vote 5 years later. Why can't we problem solve? Because we're shackled by our past. We have to look at how do we move forward. Do we take the risk to do things differently? Do I agree with everything in the bill? I put things in the bill that maybe weren't the best, but they were important, and they make changes, some faster than others. There's a menu of CWD. Just pick one. Pick one thing that we could do. There's a menu of PFAS. Could we ban PFAS and ski wax? Is there a ski wax lobby out in the hall? Could we ban PFAS and ski wax? Could we do one thing? You don't have to like all of it. But there is a lot in this bill for everyone around the state, throughout the state, that's not just using the one-time money that's there to make those investments, right those past wrongs, invest in conservation, deal with the contaminants, look at CWD, and maybe finally recognize that there have been environmental injustices that need to be corrected. Environmental injustices that occur that maybe I never experienced growing up. Maybe you've never experienced them, but people have. And if we don't see it, it's just kind of like the contaminants. We may not see that. We may not have experienced, but it's real. And why don't we start acknowledging the reality of it? Why do we come back year after year on some of these things, Representative Heinzman? Because I think people have the ability to grow. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll be sad again. But I believe people have the ability to grow. And maybe the other body who last year would not allow anything to become law that said the words environmental justice, maybe they'll have a conversion. Maybe they will see that there's been injustice. Maybe they will see that we could try some of these things. But if we don't try, if we don't send them these things, if we don't make the effort, it won't happen. So I'm willing to take that risk, and I'm asking you to take that risk and vote yes for this bill.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Hi there. Going good.
Would you have mine?
On.
Can you move your thing? I'm going to casually talk to you.
Will the clerk please call the names of members who have not yet voted?
Davids.
Davids, no.
Davids, no. Franzen.
Franson, no.
Franzen, no. Hamilton.
Hamilton, no.
Hamilton, no. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Lissegard. Lissegard. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Mecklin. Mecklin. Mortensen.
Mortensen, no.
Mortensen, no. Thompson.
Aye.
Thompson, aye. Lissegard. Lissegard, aye. Mecklin. Mecklin.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 ayes and 59 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.